Instagram at OneMic Show, and we're now also on TikTok. So please remember to follow us. We're also taking in live calls tonight. 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. Again, the number is 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. Now, if you've ever wondered how global wars and foreign alliances can quietly reshape the future of a country like Kenya, tonight's conversation is for you. In the escalating US-Israel confrontation with Iran, there are growing fears that Kenyans working in Gulf states are finding themselves close to a widening conflict. At the same time, troubling reports have surfaced of Kenyan youth being unknowingly recruited into the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, joining us shortly to unpack it all is Irungu Houghton, Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya. And the big question tonight is, what responsibilities does the Kenyan government have to its citizens in times of global conflict? So start dropping your comments below and let us know where you're tuned in from. What city, what country, what state, what island. I know there's a lot of Kenyans out there who are stranded, who are traveling. Please give us your experiences or experiences of people you know. Na bila kusahau, tunapokea mziki toka DJ wetu Machachari, Mleta Habari, DJ Omosh Fire. Na tunadunda kule viwanjani na Mika Ojezeki na Besaba Mgongoni akiletea habari za michezo. Na moja kwa moja toka Kilimanjaro Studios ni mimi mtangazaji na mwanahabari wa Kompendo Ali Badawi. Kwetu wananiita mteule na wengine mniite mjukuu wa Masai, because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, Masai by choice. Sichagui, sikagui, na sibagui. Karibuni.
Now, let's talk politics.
Now, this hour we are turning our focus to the bigger question facing Kenya in a time of global conflict following the escalating US-Israel-Iran tensions. From Kenyans working across Gulf states being suddenly close to a widening war, to troubling reports of Kenyan youth being recruited into the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya, Irungu Houghton, will be joining us shortly to help unpack what this all means and what responsibility the Kenyan government has to protect its citizens abroad. So please drop a comment below and tell us what city, what state, what country you're tuned in from. So again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. I can see Stephen JJ all the way from Texas is tuned in. Karibu sana Stephen JJ. And Kaiser Soze, aka Afro Jamaican, is also tuned in from Canada. Please tell us what's happening in Canada. Things are lighting up here in the US. You know, things are lighting up across the world. There's a lot of war, a lot of conflict going on. Please tell us what's happening in Canada. Number to call, 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. And then I want you to remember that we are also live on YouTube. So please drop a comment on YouTube. Tell us where you're tuned in from and what's going on in your part of the country or your part of the world. Now we're going to get started right away as we have so much to cover tonight. Now, as the US-Israel war with Iran escalates, there's a serious question that is emerging for Kenya. Is our foreign policy protecting Kenyan lives or placing the country on the wrong side of a dangerous conflict? With thousands of Kenyans working in regions dangerously close to the escalating tensions in the Gulf, it raises the critical question: how far must the Kenyan government go to protect its citizens abroad in times of global conflict? At the same time, disturbing reports have emerged of Kenyan youth being recruited to fight in the Russia-Ukraine war, raising urgent concerns about protecting Kenyan citizens against exploitation. Now, joining us in studio to help us unpack these issues is the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya, Irungu Houghton. Now, we hosted Irungu last year in April, where we had a conversation on abductions, enforced disappearances, and police brutality in Kenya. We also had a discussion on why Kenyan human rights defenders get labeled as foreign agents of Europeans. But today, Irungu is here to help us make sense of where Kenya stands in the unfolding global crisis. The big question tonight is, what responsibilities does the Kenyan government have to its citizens in times of global conflict? Now, feel free to let us know what you think in the comments below. And the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. And without much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to join me in welcoming the man who was once a DJ before getting into activism. He's a fierce advocate for social justice and unapologetic human rights defender. Irungu, karibu sana to the OneMic Show. Please tell us how you're feeling tonight.
So first of all, I feel very accomplished because I managed to make it to the studio. This is the summit of Kilimanjaro by public transport, which for a village man from Nairobi is pretty good. So I'm feeling pretty okay.
By public transport, you mean Uber? You know Uber nowadays is public transport.
Hiyo ni mambo ingine. That is now digital apps.
Okay.
What I mean is like a bus, a train.
Wow.
Yeah, I knew you'd be impressed.
So you made it here.
I connected 4 connections. In fact, I went 33 bus stops.
Wow, that is impressive. I
haven't done that since I went to Ajia.
You know, I have no idea. Like, to be honest with you, I have no idea how to get here.
You can return with me if you'd like.
By bus. Where? Okay, that's a good one. Because when you said public transport, I assumed you meant Uber. Because Uber is becoming Bolt. Uku Bolt Atuna. We don't have Bolt for us. You know, like there's so many apps in Kenya. It is interesting. I felt like I needed an app that has a summary of all the apps and showing
to let you know
price.
which ones have drivers, which ones don't have drivers, and which ones you need to carry your cars
in Kenya, all of our cars have drivers. It's only in America you don't have drivers. Obviously, there's a shortage of drivers.
No, I meant, you know, like when I say drivers, I actually mean that, you know, kuna zile apps zingine ukiingia hapo ndani, you can't go by yourself, even though you need to go by yourself. You need to carry somebody with you, just in case dereva aende combo. Ndio muwe wawili.
Okay, sawa. Now, Irungu, before we get started, we know that the world is currently in flames and most travelers are getting stranded across the world. But you made it here to the US. Yeah. So which shortcut did you use public transport to get here? Because Kenyans are getting stranded in all parts of the world. You know, like they're on social media saying that they have no way of getting back home.
So I was fortunate. I booked on Ethiopian Airways. If you're listening into this, Ethiopian Airlines, I wouldn't mind a discount on the next flight. It was quite expensive. But I came in through Addis Ababa.
Wow. Okay.
So I skipped the Gulf.
So the Addis Ababa route did not have issues.
Yeah, it was uninterrupted.
Okay. Lucky.
How long was your layover?
Yeah.
4 hours. About 4 hours.
And then a 14-hour?
Yeah, then 14 straight.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. We have Irungu Houghton in the studio, Executive Director, Amnesty International. I can see TechTed is already joining the conversation from Massachusetts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Washeke is also tuned in. Washeke is tuning in from my canoe in the streets of Nairobi. We are going to be talking about that. Nairobi is in floods, mafuriko all over the place.
But Ali,
we are going to be talking about that.
Why are we going to be talking about it?
We are going to be talking about it.
For a friend, because
we are going to be talking about it.
We were just here last year, same time, same place, and the same thing happened.
We're going to be talking about it because Irungu has written an article on the governance of cities. So later on in the show we'll be talking about that because it's more of, if we don't have the right governance, the cities are going to become unlivable. So he will talk about that article a bit.
So are you saying Lake Dimples is not a good thing for people to have?
No, it's not a good thing for people to have. Again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. Now, I don't go back to you. There was a big announcement that you made back in February that we'll shortly get to, not right now. But before that, last year, April, while you were here, we talked about building a movement. How do you see your idea and Kenya's human rights landscape holding up against this new global war that has been raging for almost a week now in Iran? Irungu.
So thanks. It's a great question. I think just before we kick off on that one, maybe if I can just take a moment just to honor Jesse Jackson, who I believe there's a funeral service in Chicago today. And as we know, he is one of the last of the civil rights elders, with the exception of Andrew Young. And I think it's just worth to pause and reflect a little bit on his legacy. And his legacy is actually very important in a time like this, where you have, accelerating toxicity against people on the basis of their identity. You have authoritarianism. You have the stripping of citizenship for people of color. Jesse really stood for the last 6 years or more against that. And of course, he was, I guess, one of the closest to the Martin Luther King period as well. I'd like to also just make a connection with Mugambi Kiai. Mugambi Kiai was half Jesse's age. He is a Kenyan. He passed away a couple of weeks ago and was buried, I think, yesterday. And Mugambi Kiai is one of Kenya's, I guess, most foremost human rights defenders, particularly the right to expression. But coming to the question that you've raised, I think the we find this world to be extremely complex and unpredictable in many ways. And we maybe, if this conflict in the Gulf is not de-escalated, we could be on the verge of the Third World War, right? Because the speed at which it is pulling in different countries means that many countries will not be exempt either in terms of direct intervention in the war, or in terms of the disruption to trade, to oil, to the displacement that we'll see that will come from that. And as Kenyans, I think we have to recognize that we will not be exempt from this. Not only do we have something like about 400,000 Kenyans working in the Gulf,
yes,
but we are dependent on the oil supplies as well. The disruption that there is in terms of air travel, as we started off talking earlier about, is not just affecting Kenyans now, but it will potentially affect Kenyans going through. And then there is the bigger question, which is, are we seeing the deterioration of the multilateral rule of law system, which Kenya has historically, really been an advocate for the idea of a multilateralism system that is based on the United Nations, that's based on the rule of law, and actually doesn't allow states to take action against other states without getting approval from the Security Council.
Wow, what an introduction there. This is, it's quite a profound moment where we don't know what tomorrow will bring. We don't know what will be there next
about
week.
The next hour?
Yes, and what you said also is also very profound, that we could be, Third World War could have started. Because I think what people do not realize about world wars is that when they're starting, people do not necessarily, when the first shots are fired, people at the time do not necessarily know that this is a world war. And this goes to tell people, gone are the days of saying, history is a useless subject. These are the moments, when you're seeing when people who are ambivalent to history or do not like history or think it's useless, they're quite oblivious of what's happening. They don't even know, people are not understanding when you tell them that we could be, the Third World War could have started. So those are just some of the things that we're going to be discussing tonight. I first want to introduce the rest of the panel. Before that, I see Jodo Mole here is commenting. Anasema Jodo Mole says hello to activist Irungu, and he says also Sakaja one way inje. Jodo, tell us more. Tell us more by what you mean by Sakaja one way inje. And then he's also acknowledging the tribute you made to Reverend Jesse Jackson. So I want to introduce the panel. Right on my left here, I have DJ Omosh Fire. This has been a week where things have been moving rapidly, Kenyans being stranded, the Kenyans in the Gulf. We're getting videos of Kenyans in the Gulf showing an actual missile landing right outside the quarters of where they live. So Mosh, karibu sana, what's your expectation of the show tonight? 1 minute. DJ Mosh Fire.
Hey, Maze, I don't know what to say after ambivalent and oblivious. But unajua those big words of yours unayafaa kuzitone down. Kuna wase wengine kama mimi hatuelewi hizo vitu zako. But then,
that is why we have AI.
Sasa AI unajua sahi huwezi ingia ndani ya Claude na sijui ule msee.
AI is live.
Live. Tuko live. You cannot, there is no time for sijui, kupenya. Yes. No, you can't. And then, those days when we used to be in class dubbing from that guy who was next to you, pia sahi hakuna dubbing.
No more Kenya.
Huwezi. Huwezi. Ali, this is a time where you even have to sit back and ask yourself, where are you coming from, or where are you going to? Like, what is going on with things around you? And then at the end of all of this, or to me, I'm saying, okay, the way things are happening with the blocking of CG Suez, I don't know, there's this, there's that. Then I'm remembering harakati ya COVID, vile vitu zilikuwa zimeenda south by southwest. And we live within DC area, which is not a good area to live in when there's a war.
No.
It's not a good area to live in. Sasa ndio nasema afadhali tuende Oklaocha ndio tukaangae huko, maybe in those fields we could be a little bit safe.
Yeah.
Unless somebody wants to hit a data center that's sitting next to you where you're sitting in the fields.
Or maybe rural West Virginia ama huko ni karibu.
Oklahoma italipuliwa ya kwanza kwa sababu huko ndio kuko na data center zote.
Okay. Haya. Omosh.
It's scary. I think we can laugh, But this is extremely scary because we don't know where we are going with this. And as from what we have seen, this is not like the Gulf Wars. You know, those ones where we're seeing Scud missiles, nini, ati shock and awe, nini. No, this is a world of drones. Vitu may change. Things are totally different. And it's precision strikes, nini. And then the question you ask yourself is, what's stopping that from happening in Manipur?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's scary just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Let alone the other things that come with it about day-to-day living, you know. And we have a guy who's sitting kwa ofisi kubwa ambaye guy doesn't give a flying flip about nothing. And we the citizens have allowed him.
Well, I think within you know, like maybe a month is too far. Within about 2 weeks, we are gonna start getting to know the full scale of what's happening, and this, of course, is happening in the Middle East, and we don't know, you know, like where it's gonna move from there. And with that said, let me go to Mika. Mika is someone who's lived in the Middle East. He knows the place. And we've been seeing the videos of what's been happening there. All these countries that were peaceful places for sherehe, happiness, where the last place you would ever expect to erupt in the Middle East, they're all now under fire. Mika Och, talk to us about what's happening and your expectations for the episode tonight. Mika.
Oh, thank you very much, Ali. And I want to ask everybody, how were you? How was your week? And it's another Friday to go happy hours, happy hour. Irungu, thank you for joining us again. Really appreciate it. Now, Ali, it seems like what most people don't realize is that those regions, the places of those regions understood exactly the geopolitics of that reason. And that is why you see they're armed the way they are. I know a lot of people will never believe that those countries have missile defenses or have such sophisticated weapons as what they are, because the kind of missiles that are being rained on them are not just ordinary missiles. They're very sophisticated new missiles, which for them to repel where you get like only one or two landing, and those landings don't have that much casualties, shows you that the defense system is also good. So it seems like, as you say, people don't want to learn history, but if you learn history, you will understand why it's happening, why Iran is responding the way it's supposed to respond. Because remember, all these places are supposed to be defenses for when the Americans and the Israelis attack them. Those bases that the Iranians are hitting are the bases where these guys are supposed to be defending themselves, so they can just make it easier for them to do a one-way attack. So Iran, instead of fighting conveniently, is like, you know what, let me destroy your defenses too, and then head on each other, one-on-one. So it's a matter of you learning, it's a matter of strategy that's happening. We don't know how it's going to be. As you've said, it's not going to be a short war. And these are those wars whereby they can easily become world wars based on proxies and certain interests being hit, and then you find people being pulled involuntarily into this war. So it's fearful time. It's time whereby you are. And then another thing that most people don't know is that this is also the time whereby cowards can take advantage and do things in the name of sleeper cells or whatever they want to call themselves. So it's one of those times whereby in the world you're not supposed to be living like this. Especially after COVID, there's supposed to be no war. You're supposed to be happy because the world nearly came to an end. Now, it seems like we've come back to a point whereby we really don't care. We are at a scale whereby who has the biggest nuclear, who has the most nuclear. Is it me or you? It's scary times. But I think things will de-escalate in the coming weeks, coming months, hopefully. That closing of the Strait of Hormuz basically has cut down 70% of movement of shipping stuff. That's going to affect people. That's going to make people make phone calls to their legislatures, and hopefully that pressure will end this thing.
Okay, asante sana, Mika. You know, like we are in an unpredictable environment, and hopefully things calm down. But the way it's looking, things are not going to be coming down anytime soon. And I can see Hanigal is already tuned in on YouTube and Asema, hi, gents. Tell us what's going on your side, Hanigal. I believe that's in Texas. Please tell us what's happening. Karibu sana. Again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. We have Irungu Houghton in studio, Executive Director, Amnesty International, Kenya. Later on, we are going to get to, you know, like our super producer, Mubelwa Bandio, who's also going to be in the panel. Not right now, but maybe a little bit later. But before we get...
Ali, are you sure that Tanzanians know there's a war?
So actually...
I'm just asking for...
Yeah, so actually, super producer has been, you know, like, for those who don't know, super producer is actually a real journalist. It's not like the rest of us.
So
he's a real trained journalist. So
me, I'm a journalist. I don't know about you.
Yeah, he still does. he still actually does journalism work with international
organizations,
media stations. I don't know whether you do that too. I'm not sure. I've never heard you. But
no, the last time I tried, I was doing it with a chap from Azam. You know, rest in peace, my good friend. But kuna vile.
Okay, but Azam is not international.
That's international from here, Omera Bwana.
Yes, Mubelo Bandio, karibu sana. You know, Mubelo tumekuwa tukikusikia katika redio mbalimbali za kimataifa ukizungumzia kuhusu ghasia ambazo zimezuka kule Mashariki ya Kati. Please talk to us. What are people saying there? Na mtazamo wako wa mambo ambayo ya matukio ambayo yametokea kufuatia kazi yako unaiona vipi?
That's a heavy question. At least you should have asked once.
Yeah. Kwanza, I'm not sure kama vita ita last that long. Na I'm surprised kwanza kwamba Trump hajaondoka. I think the easiest way out kwake ilikuwa ni kuondoka na kuwa na victory lap kwamba tumemua Khamenei.
Yeah.
Lakini Marco Rubio alisema kwamba Iran ni ngumu pengine kuliko nchi nyingine yote kwa sababu ya system yao. Remember, right now hawana supreme leader, hawana viongozi wote wakuu wa jeshi na kila kitu, na bado vita inaendelea. That's the system ambayo wako nayo.
Yes.
Na it's 180 degree kutoka Marekani, ambako huku ni mtu mmoja anakaa ikulu anafanya decisions, kule wanasema hatumhitaji mtu. Na kama uliangalia hata juzi wakati jana nafikiri wakati waziri wa mambo ya nje alikuwa anahojiwa na NBC.
Niliona
na akasema wala hatuna haraka kumpata kiongozi kwa sababu sisi tuna system ambayo it's working right now. Hatuna haja, hatukimbizani.
Na alisema hawataki ceasefire.
Alisema hawataki ceasefire. Yes, kwa sababu Marekani alisema alitaka ceasefire. So Trump alisema kwamba Iran wanataka ceasefire so badly. Wale Iran wakasema kwamba tutaipata ceasefire on our own terms. Na walishasema tangu mwanzo tulishajiandaa, tunajua nani zao zilipo. Ukumbuke Iran kabla ya vita kuanza, Iran alivisit nchi zote karibu. Akawaambia wale wakianzisha vita sisi tutapiga kwenye nchi zenu, lakini tunapiga maslahi yao, hatuwapigi nyinyi. Alizungumza nao wote.
Okay.
So there is nothing new. Hii kitu US wanafanya, wanajaribu kuongea, haipo. Kwa hiyo kubadilisha uongozi it's almost impossible. Kwa sababu sasa hivi maandamano Iraq na sehemu nyingine yote ni ya kupinga kinachotokea wanachokifanya hao. Wao walifikiri kwamba baada ya ile demonstration ya kuhusu cost of living and everything ingetumika kama namna ya kuondoa. It didn't work. Kwa hiyo sasa hivi ni Trump anatafuta the way out na Israel na watu wengine. Unfortunately, effect zitakapoanza kuwa kubwa, wataanza kutafuta namna ya kuondoka, and hopefully haito last to summer, because ikifika summer hapa I'm not even sure deep blue kama ipo, lakini itakuwa darker deep blue wave,
dark blue
ambayo itakuja sio too dark, lakini itakwenda deep, kwa sababu tunaanza kuona Marekani, unajua ukishagusa mafuta that's one of the worst thing ambacho nataka kugusa, kwa sababu even ni vitu ambavyo vinatumika kila siku,
economics.
So kwa hiyo I don't know, nafikiri wamekamatwa pabaya sasa hivi Marekani, na ni lazima watafute way out. Na the guys just Trump, niliposikia nasema kwamba so katiba ya Iran ni kwamba akifa supreme au akiondoka madarakani, kuna baraza, kuna council inatakiwa ikae, inaongozwa na rais na viongozi wengine, wanamchagua supreme leader. Trump baada ya kumuua supreme leader anasema anataka awe sehemu ya council ya kumchagua.
Yeah.
Unajua what that does kwa watu wa kule.
Yeah.
It was just
How?
Yeah.
That's the question.
And then, the worst part in all of this, and Ali hasn't touched on it, I'm sure he's coming with it. Anakuja tu, namuona akikuja. This is during Ramadan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yani, if there's a disrespect that you could have thrown to these guys, you did it during Ramadan. What are you saying? And they are an Islamic state and have been since 79.
It's crazy kwamba I'm not sure kwa nini Trump anataka kuwa na mazungumzo sasa hivi. Because the last time when they did, walipoa bomb, ile 12-day war, was in the middle of negotiation.
Yeah.
This
Correct.
time,
again. Yes.
Baada ya the week before, wale watu wa Atomic wakisema kwamba everything is going right. Lakini ukumbuke Trump alisema kwamba hakuna kitu ambacho Obama anaweza ka-negotiate kikawa bora kuliko cha kwake. So, ameanzia wapi? Alikwenda kwenye UN, kakata hela UN, kaanzisha Board of Peace.
Yeah.
Ili yeye replace kinachofanya na UN. Anaanzisha vita, anachotaka, anakata hiyo, ili yeye awe na mkataba mwingine. Lakini Iran amesema kwamba, no, not this time, na any ceasefire itakuja kwa terms zetu sisi.
Lakini swali unaweza uliza ni, hii vita ni ya Marekani. Kuna haja yoyote ya Marekani kuanzisha
sasa hiyo
Marekani?
No. Vita sio ya Marekani. Alafu kuna nafikiri tatizo jingine Trump yuko nayo ni Marco Rubio, ambaye somehow anakuwa na mouth diarrhea anapokuwa akizungumza. Kwa sababu alianza na kusema kwamba the hardest thing ni kunegotiate na Iran kwa sababu it's not one person. Ni system ambayo imeembed mpaka kwenye imani. Akasema. Sasa hivi amekuja anasema kwamba hivi vita sisi tulilazimishwa na Israel kuingia. And then sasa mnataka watu wa Houthis, watu wengine waanze, mnataka kuanza kufund hizi group nyingine kuanza kuingia. Wakurdi, yes. Yeah. Ambayo ni the worst. Sasa hivi watu wanaanza kuuliza kwani Waisraeli wako wapi? Na kama mjui, Baron, mtoto wake, ameshawekewa ana document za kumfanya asiingie vitani hata ikitakiwa kuingia vitani. Kwa sababu amesha prove. Kwa hiyo kama baba yake, na sasa hivi kwa hivyo hakuna draft kwake.
Okay, wanamuita Mubelo wa Baba Paulina. The number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. The one thing I'll say real quick before we go back to Irungu is that on this happening during Ramadan, and I really don't understand, whether the current administration doesn't have the right people to advise them on doing certain things. For those who understand the history of Iran, the history of Persians, and also the history of Shia Islam. Shia Islam is the version of Islam that's practiced in Iran. About 10 to 15% of the global Muslims. Ndio mkubwa wao, ndio kiongozi wao.
Amenei alikuwa ni kama papa kwa Katoliki.
Yeah. So ukienda kwa historia, you go back to history to the beginning of Shiism, the roots of Shiism is after Prophet Muhammad died. And there was people who disagreed with Caliph Abu Bakr being chosen. After Caliph Abu Bakr was chosen, there was Umar, and then there was Uthman, and then Ali is the one who came. So they felt that Ali should have been the caliph right after the Prophet because he was related to the Prophet. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand is the history of Shiism from Caliph Ali is he was assassinated. The son of Ali, Hussein, assassinated. Martyrdom is in their blood. So killing an Ayatollah during the month of Ramadan, one who had been very defiant and said he's not going, is considered a very big victory. And here I'm just talking about, the roots of Shia Islam. He's died in what's referred to as Shahid, and dying Shahid is one of the best kinds of death, and this is both in Sunni and Shia Islam. So that's just one thing that I think the US government had not calculated right.
They're not reading the room. I don't know who they're talking to.
And what might happen is that even people who are lukewarm to him, because he had also a lot of opposition within the country. There are people who did not like, his rule. Yes. But what this might do over time with 160, schoolgirls being killed, it will slowly start bringing people towards that side. But anyway, that's just a brief of what is happening now from the theological side, for those who don't understand. And Sally Jones is tuned in. Sally Jones is saying, tuning in from mid-air with my blankie. Okay, I don't know where you're going because right now the air is not good. It says, thought they appointed the son of the supreme leader. Ama ilikuwa Kofefe News. That is Kofefe News because there's a lot of, information being weaponized.
Misinformation.
From the Israeli side, there's a lot of misinformation that's coming.
And disinformation.
And disinformation. And sometimes I'm seeing, like even, like some of these Kenyan influencers being caught off guard and publishing information that's misinformation. Before we go back to Irungu, Mika wanted to say something, then we're going to come back to Irungu.
I just want to say, for the 160 girls, Iran admitted that it was them who killed them mistakenly, by mistake.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
So it is one of those, just the same way that Iran have been truthful in this war. Just the same way that drone that attacked a British base in Cyprus, they said it was not theirs, and the British collaborated them and said, yeah, it was not you.
Okay.
Somebody else tried to do something else. So there have been things whereby, if you look at it, they have admitted what they've done, and they're not trying to oversell themselves or say anything. So apart from the war just being fought out of missiles, it's also an information, or as you said, information war, whereby they're trying to catch each other in lies, because misinformation will go a long way in how this thing is going to end up.
Okay, all right. Now that's quite interesting because and in the Shia tradition, certain things are done differently. But you see, all these times we do, Muslims, especially in a place like Kenya, we noticeably spend a lot more time in madrasa. People who've lived alongside Muslims will notice that. When we were kids, weekends tulikuwa hatuna, we used to go to madrasa. Yep. So part of the things that we get taught, during these processes includes even rules of war. As a kid, when we're being taught those things, they would not make sense, but what I'm seeing, Iran, trying to do, as Mika said, they're trying to be truthful. They're actually trying to go by that textbook of what they're supposed to do, and they're using a strategy of death by 1,000 cuts. They know they're overpowered by weapons, so they're like, we're gonna throw these small rocks until this giant gets exhausted, because it's very expensive to try to block those missiles. But anyway, we're not here to diagnose the war. Number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. Wanna come back to Irungu now before we get into the meat and bones of where Kenya stands in the current global order.
Where do you come from?
Before we get into the meat and bones of where Kenya stands in the current global order, it has been officially announced that Irungu Houghton will be stepping down as Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya in June 2026. After 8 years on the helm. As you can see, it has caught many people off guard.
I've been caught flabbergasted.
Yes,
my words, my mouth is down. It's hanging.
Gasted flabber.
Yes.
Oh, but maybe he's going into DJing.
Yes. So tell us more about you exiting stage.
So I joined Amnesty in 2018 in January, and it's now been 8 years. So I've had 2 terms. I should also mention that I just turned 60. So I have reached a certain point in, my role as the director.
Yes.
So one of the thoughts that I had was really just to it's a good time for me to step down. We are about 17 months from the elections. So I think it will allow for a new director to come in and prepare the ground for them to be able to lead Amnesty's work throughout the elections. As for me, I will probably write another book and look at how else to support the work that we've been doing inside the country. So I'm not retiring. I just reloading and refiring.
Okay. All right.
Ali ujama amenunua ploti Kitengela.
Mi aliposema election nikajua labda nakwenda
let me just declare
because it's close to 2027.
Let me just declare I'm not going to farming. I'm not going to farming.
You're not going to farming.
So politics? So he might be a fisher of men.
Politics.
Farmer of men. That's an interesting one.
Okay, but is it coincidence that it's close to 2027?
No, the actual decision to leave was primarily that I've done what I needed to do, and I believe in in governance. I believe in not sitting in an organization for too long. There's no way we can challenge Museveni and Kagame and all those leaders that get stuck and don't know how to hand over power. And then in ourselves, in our own organizations, we do the same thing.
Okay.
So it's time.
But Atuoli is teaching you guys, mukae tu mpaka mukue. Oh, sorry.
No, not a good example.
Okay. All right. Now back to our conversation today. I think that's just
umepata kazi UN.
Yeah.
No.
Wewe. Kwa nini unasema nini mapema? Si unajua atatuambia tukizima kamera.
Okay, sawa. Now in your January article,
yes.
You called for a rights-based world order. You argue that we are drifting into international anarchy. What exactly is a rights-based world order, and what replaces it when it collapses? Because we hear about this a lot of times. Many people don't know what a rights-based world order is. Irungu.
So one of the critical factors in the fact that we haven't gone back to another world war was the establishment of the post-Second World War order. And that order essentially respected the sovereignty of states, but it also created an international mechanism in the United Nations where there were disputes before people went to war. They had an opportunity to negotiate their interests in a multilateral way. And we created a whole generation of international multilateral instruments like the United Nations. But also there was the African Union or the Organization of African Unity, and then the African Union. There's also the East African Community. These institutional frameworks are extremely important, particularly when they are built around international human rights law. The idea that, for example, that you can't just bomb a school. And just to come back to Maker's point, I'm not sure. There have been 6 schools that have been targeted in the Iranian conflict, or the Iran-US conflict. The one that we were all shocked about was the very first one, and that's in this school called Shajara in southern Iran, where it has now been documented that over 160 children have died. If that's the one you're referring to, I've not seen any reference that suggests that the Iranian government bombed a school of Iranian children. What I've seen essentially is now the US military undertaking an investigation, which I think is an important step. But I think until we have an independent human rights investigation of what happened there, then we will not rest until that takes place. But a human rights-based system ensures that civilians are not targeted, that if there is a war, there are rules within which conflicts can take place. It is also the basis upon which modern diplomacy takes place. So if you think about, the Kenyan government is one of, 50 or so countries in Africa that participate regularly in the African Union, in the United Nations. And it's extremely important that forum continues to be part of, I guess, the architecture for how we negotiate disputes globally. When we have states essentially ignoring those systems, ignoring the Security Council, and essentially just unleashing war on a country or attacking the leader of another country, then you have the beginnings of what I described as anarchy.
Okay, so the beginnings of anarchy. And I think that's the part that I think for people who are not very familiar with history or always thought that history is just one of those subjects that's a nuance, is a nuisance. I think this is the time that people need to start getting close to their history. So Irungu, again, right now we have hundreds of thousands of Kenyans working across the Gulf. We're talking Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and I know there's also Kenyans in Bahrain, there's Kenyans in Kuwait, there's Kenyans in Jordan. So these are regions that have quickly become exposed to the current US, Israel, and Iran conflict. In situations like this, what legal responsibility does the Kenyan government have to protect its citizens abroad? Do Kenyans have a right to evacuation in the event of war, or is evacuation simply a policy decision that governments make depending on resources and politics? Irungu.
No, I mean, it's obvious, I think, for many people under the Kenyan law, you do not lose your citizenship simply because you're working abroad. The state has, one of the reasons that the state sets up embassies in different countries is essentially to protect citizens everywhere they are. The United States does this regularly, and they do this extremely efficiently. They've already begun to organize airlifts of their own citizens out of the Gulf area. So the Kenyan government has a legal obligation. It's not just a moral obligation, it's actually a legal obligation to provide protection for Kenyans outside of their borders. The second thing that I think is really important is that under the migration policy that the Kenya Kwanza administration introduced, this idea that there would not be jobs for Kenyans, for all Kenyans in Kenya, and therefore they set up bilateral agreements with different governments across the world so that Kenyans, whether they're skilled or semi-skilled, could actually go out and work. And the Gulf states are probably one of the areas where there's been a large influx of Kenyans in the hotel industry, in the security industry, in the domestic worker, childcare support industry. These are all areas which have absorbed probably about 400,000 Kenyans over the years. And I think at a time like this, we must see more than simply advisories. What we must see is practical action to make sure that people are not left vulnerable to missile attacks, debris that's falling from buildings, airspace closures. We talked about this, and flight suspensions. There has to be practical strategies that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are implementing. Fortunately, I think we have a strong, clear-minded principal secretary in Rosalind Ojogu. So I do have a sense of confidence that they will be doing whatever they can do to bring Kenyans back home if necessary, or at least to find shelter for them in these countries that are now affected by this war.
And I think they started today. The first KQ, I think first KQ landed, I think today or yesterday. So
Kutoa watu.
Okay, but it's interesting because
Yuko wapi Qatar?
nafikiri walitolea
Dubai.
No, not Dubai, because they were
the KQ
they were
from Dubai.
They were shuttled. They were shuttled for like 12 hours to the somewhere.
Was this at their cost? Because I saw
I'm not sure.
some comments around like where the Prime Cabinet Secretary was saying that people should try doing it at their cost.
You know, Ali, so
Yes, Mika.
this is the thing. There are some charter planes which are very expensive, right? Like private planes, charter planes which are very expensive, right? Now, for the carriers, for the national carriers, they're going depending on the amount, on how they're allowed by the countries affected. So the countries are like, okay, we can clearly escort 16 planes at one time safely outside with jets to protect them in case of anything. So they will count and start seeing how much they can allow that. So for national carriers, is based on how many you are allowed. So the government kind of like the Ministry of Defense or whatever kind of calculates and says, okay, fine, we can do 6 planes right now. So they will decide, okay, which ones are pressed, how many people are more stuck, which airlines like usually go there a lot, and start reducing that number based by the number of how many people are stuck.
Okay.
So
that's
it has started. It has started through KQ. It has started. But so if those people who feel like they are so scared, they can use other different ways. Hao wanaambiwa like, yo, kama huwezi ngoja the government way, like una pesa na una njia, then jisort.
Okay. Then I think that's good information. And I think part of the problem is how our media houses report.
Yeah, giving out information,
yes,
disseminating.
Because that was kind of the headline, that Prime Cabinet Secretary says, like Kenyans to find their way back home at their own cost. And that's why it's important in this, especially in this fog of war, where there's a lot of, deliberate misinformation and poor quality information going on around. It's important to be very careful. And with 400,000 workers, Kenyan workers working in the Gulf, if this war escalates, this is gonna have a very big impact on Kenya, because that means that those jobs might end up being affected. Some of these Kenyans
that money's not coming back.
Might have to come back. Might have to come back home. And that's quite a chunk of money. And one of the big differences with money that's coming from the Gulf is that they may not be paid a lot of money, but then they also do not have expenses because they're given housing.
It's living.
Yeah, it's living.
Everything.
They're given everything, they're taken care of.
Yeah.
So
ni kama raisi.
Yes, so I think a good 90% of what they earn comes to Kenya.
Is coming back, or
In
it's
one
being
way-
saved.
in
Yes,
one way,
way or
shape,
the
or
other.
form.
Yes. So
Yeah.
which is part of the economy that is
Yes.
circulating. Blah 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 blah.
So there was a piece today, I think before the interview I did in DW Swahili. They were talking about that, the amount of money, the amount of money sent from, and this is just for Kenya.
Yeah.
They didn't even amount to Tanzania, Uganda, and it's quite...
it's crazy numbers, right?
it's
It's
a
quite
crazy
it's
number.
quite a big number. I know diaspora remittances annually is about 5 billion, and more than half of that actually comes from the US, and then another big chunk after
Gulf.
the US comes from the Gulf.
The Gulf.
Yeah. So
Now
this,
only consistent, and they've been doing it for like years.
yes.
You know.
And then
Yeah.
I think the other thing you need to understand, most people, they don't go there to live forever.
No.
Hawanunui nyumba, hawanunui, so everything they do,
yes.
they either
Yes.
send home to use or to invest.
Yes.
Correct.
Watu wanaokuja US sometimes it's like, oh, nanunua
we
nyumba
are-
hapa,
we
you know,
are-
nitakaa, nitaishi.
We're part of
Kule,
society.
like Ali say,
Yeah.
they don't make good money, but almost 90% of it goes back to
Yes.
Well,
KK.
don't make good money is relative. If you know,
No,
again, if
relative to what
if
people
you're
make
not
in the
spending
US.
it,
Yeah.
then it's everything from that point is profit. You're not
Exactly,
spending
yeah.
it on food. You're not spending it on shelter, which is the key things that we are always spending our stuff on. Maybe you're only spending it on clothes. Which clothes are you buying there anyway?
Yeah.
Half the time,
Yeah.
you know, you're gonna be
na unaenda wapi?
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
with who?
And you know,
which Sharia is allowing you to go where you're going?
And you know the interesting thing is that whenever if you've ever connected through Qatar,
Yes.
that Kenyan presence is massive.
Boss, man, the guy who's over there checking your stuff at security is talking
It
to
is
you.
massive.
In fact, he looks at, Otieno Mera, what is?
Security, customer service,
Yes.
like even the cleaners,
Correct.
and now
The
like
agents.
yes, the agents.
Yes.
Last year, I was able to venture out for the first time into Qatar. Very beautiful.
Did
country.
you enjoy yourself?
I
Did
did
you do the
enjoy
tour?
myself.
Did you go see the...
I didn't go the tour. I had a
Okay.
cousin of mine,
Okay,
so my
sawa,
cousin is
sawa.
the one who was showing me around. But
Man,
very beautiful country.
place.
But even when you go onto the streets,
Yes.
the marshals, the traffic marshals, they are Kenyans. Like
Yes.
the Kenyan presence is so heavy there.
Correct.
You know, like it is. I mean, like if this war escalates, this is gonna have a very big impact on Kenya.
Kama walivyo na Lilo Havana, mtakiwemo na Lilo Nairobi kwenye...
Yes.
That is more
Yes.
big Nairobi.
Yeah,
That's not little
yeah,
Nairobi.
that is
That's more of big Nairobi. But anyway, those are just some of the things that might affect us. Now onto a different thing here, Irungu. Now Kenya was recently designated as a major non-NATO ally of the United States, a status that can involve deeper military cooperation, intelligence sharing, and defense agreements. From a human rights and constitutional perspective, to what extent is the Kenyan government legally required to disclose the scope of its military agreements with foreign powers? Do citizens have a right to transparency on these arrangements, or are such agreements typically shielded under national security? Irungu.
So this goes back about a year, almost the time that I was here. Actually, there was the announcement by the Biden administration, essentially, that we had become a major non-NATO ally, and one of the things that we struggled with at that point was, what does this actually mean, right? So I think it's good to actually unpack it a little bit, and then come to what does Kenyan law say about it. I mean, the first thing was that Kenya would get preferential access to US equipment and training. Secondly, that there would be more collaboration in training, intelligence, and I guess outreach with the AFRICOM. The third thing that was important was, of course, Kenya was elevated, in terms of its standing within Africa. And if we remember that period, Kenya was, I think, just prior to that, they just had the state dinner. So Kenya was elevated at the level of the, at the level of our partner in East Africa. The main concern, I suspect, was the growing influence of Russia and also China in Africa. So I think this was partly the framework. For the US, what they got was essentially a frontline counterterrorism partner against Al-Shabaab and ISIS and so on, and that seemed to be the main focus. But I think the important thing for Kenyans is to just recognize that, this defense cooperation, this access to military technology does not override Kenyan law. That there are obligations under Kenyan law that essentially make sure that these arrangements have to be approved by Parliament. They have to be publicly accountable. And in many ways, under the Constitution, they should have been public participation, even on a military and defense contract. There wasn't, right? If you remember, there was just an announcement.
Correct. Yes.
Parliament did not approve the agreement prior to that. And therefore, as Amnesty International, we were very concerned about whether there was a degree of parliamentary oversight or judicial oversight. But more importantly, really, the question around transparency in terms of what was it that we were offering and what were we getting as a country.
But Irungu, when we talk about public participation, I think this word, is a bit confusing to some people because when I'm thinking, an international military type of agreement, when we talk of public participation, what does Mama Mboga, go to a public participation forum and say about this? Forget about Mama Mboga, even, let's say a banker or a doctor, what do they know about this to go into a public participation forum and contribute? Or what exactly is this public participation meant to look like?
So there is a bill going through Parliament at the moment, which I do hope they manage to finish before the end of this parliamentary season, which will give flesh to what does public participation mean, what is the expectation, what is the threshold in terms of public participation. But let me just ask you a question back. At a time like this, when Kenya's position in terms of the Iran-US war is a subject of debate, and we know that the United States have bases on Kenyan soil. If the bases are struck by Iran or any of their allies within the region, Egypt or Djibouti or any of these other countries, do you think the Kenyans should have a right to discuss whether bases should be on Kenyan soil?
Oh, I certainly agree with you. Yes.
And I don't know about Mama Mbogas and vendors and all that, but I think it's important that at least there would be a certain level of consultation and a certain level of public input on that. The good thing about Kenya is very sophisticated. It has strong civil society organizations. It has a strong academic community. These are people who are interested, like us, in where is Kenya positioning itself on the new world order. And therefore, it's critical that there be opportunities for that to happen. And even if that's not going to happen, then surely there has to be parliamentary oversight on behalf of the people. But our constitution is actually very clear on this matter, which is Article 1 says that the sovereignty of the country does not lie in parliament, it lies in the people of Kenya. Yeah.
It's interesting. Last year we hosted the first Kenyan political prisoner, Abdulatif Abdallah. Yes, who was here. Now, Abdulatif's older brother, the late Sheikh Abdullahi Nasir, was part of the team that went to Lancaster and was also representing, his area, as a member of parliament, in independent Kenya. And it's interesting that he was telling me that back in those days, when people were less educated, members of parliament used to actually go out and talk about, what they discussed in parliament in public forums and tell them that, there's a possibility of a factory being brought here or a possibility of this being brought here. It used to be a regular thing,
right?
Whereby they would go and talk to people and there used to be input, from people locally, which I'm not sure how much that happens. I don't think it happens. I think out here in the US we have town halls in different congressional districts where there's an education, because public participation sometimes is explaining to the Mama Mboga this is the impact of what this military agreement may have on your kitchen table, or this is what, and then I think that allows them to be able to have a conversation about it, because when it's just these big announcements being made and being thrown, or there's gonna be a US base in Manda, I think it becomes problematic. I'd be interested to see that law. So is a bill already out, or
I think it's in its second reading at the moment.
Okay, so it's available for people to read.
It's available, yeah.
Okay, I think it's important that we go through what it is, because I think it's also important for us in the diaspora, because I feel like in the diaspora there's a lot of misdirected let me not use the word activism, but there's a lot of misdirected conversations whereby people complain about certain things, but there's no proper knowledge of how to direct these conversations in a way in which they may have policy impact, or in a way in which they may have not necessarily policy impact, but just action taken based on what was said. So I'd really love to read it, and I think it will be very important for all of us to read this public participation bill. Almost Fire, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, so earlier you saying that for the diaspora we need like a suggestion box. Mali tunaweza enda kuweka vitu ndio watu waangalie, and hopefully they're actually reading it.
So problem with suggestion boxes is that
I'm calling it a suggestion box, but
but those are things that just stay there. So I think it's important, even, like when we were doing protests during the Gen Z revolt, I started trying to learn, like from different people that we're doing this with, yes, we're doing a protest, but is there a legal way of following up this protest, and at least even if it's not action being taken or a law being changed, at least getting a response,
Correct.
based on a statement that we put out. And I think that's where Kenya is heading to, like with the Gen Z revolt, everybody wants to know, like what's happening. Everybody is kind of concerned, and they're aware. So I think now it's getting to that next phase of knowing, like what action to take, knowing the right action to take, so that you're not jogging on the spot, but you're actually making movement along the way. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just looking at the summary that I did in the on the bill back in August last year, and very briefly, what it says is what they seek to do is essentially to rebuild trust between state and citizens. So that's the first thing, is that actually it's not just about participation. It's actually what you want is trust-based policy making, right? And then the second thing is that they want to create a minimal legal framework that creates standards for feedback mechanisms. So, for example, it will require states to provide information, to engage, and to listen to views of stakeholders. And it talks about marginalized groups, particularly people with disabilities, young people, and women. It now provides for online submissions. So your box, it will be an online submission. I don't know, you had on the show last year Rose Njeri, who created, I think, one of the most powerful boxes, and she's an expert in actually getting people
and
to
she
be able
got
to
arrested for
She
that.
got arrested for it because actually she was way ahead of her time and probably ahead of the bill. But the bill will allow for this idea that it's not just consultation, it's about citizens and policymakers co-creating policies or co-creating projects that are actually meaningful to people. Because if you don't do that, what you'll have is this constant cycle of politicians essentially borrowing money to do high prestige, visible, stadia that nobody has asked for. Another lane on Thika Road that nobody has asked for. And I think that's what we need to see in this new bill, that actually it becomes much clearer, and that there is an obligation not just to ask for information, but also to act on it and to report back to people. That's the accountability.
Wow, that will be a very super move that Kenya will be making.
Let's see.
I came to learn that out here in the US, county council meetings, like out here in this studio is in PG County, but out in Montgomery County, and I believe this is in all different county councils. The hearings, their sessions are public.
Right.
Anyone can attend.
Right.
Anyone can attend. They have a calendar. Anyone can attend. So most of the times, many people don't attend, but the few people who attend, there's news reporters who attend, and then there's a few hardcore people who attend. So the interesting thing that I came to learn is that if news reporters see you there 2-3 times, they will be stopping you to ask you questions.
Your views.
And whatever your views are is what's going to end up being published. And because of that, those councilmen and women, they're going to get to know you. They will ask for your phone number, and they will be actually calling you. They'll be the ones following you, trying to find out, what they need to say there and what they need to do. So I found that very interesting. And it was like, all you need to do is show up there. They see you there 2-3 times. Everybody will want to be there with you. So whatever you're reading in the papers, it's it's suggestions that were given by very few people. So that's quite interesting. If this, especially if the county assemblies make their sessions public, I know Kenyans have time. Kenyans will go there, and it's gonna be very interesting. Again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. Please drop your comments at Waski Leo, YouTube, watu wamenyamaza, Facebook, watu wamenyamaza.
I think they're shy.
Yeah, tell us what's going on.
They could be.
Or people are scared.
No, they could be dealing with floods in their mind.
Or maybe they could be dealing with floods in their mind. There's a lot of floods in Nairobi. Yeah. But anyway, moving on.
Irungu, Irungu, did you check on your people? Are you sure people are not floating? There was a boat that was purchased for your retirement now, Dewey?
I tell you, it is in the middle of the night now, so I'm hoping that people are safely in their beds and not floating on their beds.
And we're going to be talking about that a bit
I have friends who are floating in their beds,
yes,
in their houses.
Yes. So, Moshe, we're going to be talking about
which
the
area?
floods.
Maybe I should just ask.
I need to find out.
I
need to find out. I'll send a message.
Yes. Yes, we're going to be talking about the
last
floods.
time I checked, they were sitting on the stairs because room yao iko chini. They were sitting on the stairs, lakini chini kwa gumboots ilikuwa ishaingia ndani ya gumboots.
Okay, sawa. Hiyo tutaongea baadaye on the show. But moving on to something different before we get sidetracked here. Last year, when you were here, we discussed Kenya's police deployment to Haiti. More recently, there have been troubling reports of Kenyan youth being tricked or recruited into fighting in the Russia-Ukraine war, something that Amnesty has actually spoken out about. With global conflicts now expanding, including the current tensions involving the US, Israel, and Iran, there's always a risk of young Kenyans being drawn into foreign conflicts that they barely understand. So maybe, Rungu, from a human rights perspective, what safeguards should exist to prevent Kenyan youth from being deceived into becoming boots on the ground in foreign wars?
Yeah. I mean, this has been one of the, I think, one of the most disturbing stories that have emerged in the last couple of months, 3 months now. But, up to 1,000 Kenyans have either been duped or have gone in with their eyes wide open to fight on the side of mostly on the side of the Russian army. Many of them have been paid large amounts of money, and when they get there, they discover that actually they are being deployed with very little training and very little safeguards. So we've started to see, bodies returning back to Kenya now, and of course their families are screaming for justice and screaming for the government to take action. I think what is even more disturbing about this is that there are a number of agencies, particularly these labor agencies that operate within Kenya, that actually are actively soliciting on behalf of their clients, these folks, and they're not always telling people the truth of what they're going to do in Russia. There is quite a bit of suspicion that government offices are very involved in these labor agencies, and therefore increasingly now what we are asking for is for those people who are trafficking, in this sense, those people who are trafficking Kenyans into war zones, that they must be held accountable as well. It's not just about helping Kenyans to get their bodies, their loved ones back to Kenya, but actually there needs to be accountability for this whole chain of business that has now developed around people's lives.
But who are these people? Because there must be, it may be foreign agents, but there must be Kenyans involved to get access to Kenyans.
Absolutely.
So who are these people who are doing this?
So what we hear, and the Inspector General, I think was last week, said that investigations will turn over every single stone, and they will be
leave no stone unturned.
No stone will be left untouched. So we're waiting to hear the outcome of those investigations. But I think what he was indicating was that there were government officials, state officials, who were involved in this exercise. It's not just a market-based program. It actually is facilitated by people in government offices.
Wow. Okay. So that's because I think some of them were living on I think visitor visas. So there has to be some facilitation that was done to allow this to happen. And I'm keen on what that investigation will bring out. And I hope the perpetrators, get arrested or something, because I'm sure there's someone who's sitting on these profits.
No, people are making a lot of money.
Yes, because when you think about it, the sums that I've been hearing that people were being paid to initially go there, and sometimes it's easy for people to blame
Poverty.
to blame people for taking up that offer. But when you see what kind of poverty sometimes is affecting people,
Ali, you saw it.
yeah, no,
You saw it.
I've seen
You
it.
saw it when you went home, right?
Yes, I've seen
That
it.
trip.
I've seen it at so many different levels.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't my first time seeing
Correct,
it.
but
I think
yeah,
I think
I
there's
get
a,
what you're saying,
I
yeah.
think there's a category of Kenyan who does not realize the depth of poverty
Ikombaya.
that is there in
Mashinani.
Mashinani. Yes.
Ikombaya.
Yeah.
It
It is so
bad.
deep and it is cyclical. It is generational. So people should be easy before they start blaming people on, kwa nini ulienda Urusi, or why did you do this? So I think that's something that people need to pay attention to.
I got a quick question for Irungu. Irungu, are
Yes.
you seeing the same trend that we're seeing in Kenya with folks going over to the war zone? Is that being seen, say, in Tanzania and Uganda, or is this just a Kenya thing?
That's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to that. It would be worth investigating to see whether the cartels that are involved in this are much more active in the Kenyan context, and whether for example, the Tanzanian or the Ugandan government are much more, vigilant
Yeah.
to stop this from happening. That would
Yeah.
be a great comparative analysis.
Yeah, maybe Bandio can tell us about Tanzania.
Maybe Bandio umesikia.
Although I know Tanzania,
Yeah.
Tanzania as a foreigner, you'll be smoked out real quick, especially if you're coming in and you're trying to do some shenanigans. You'll be smoked out real quick. But Bandio, sijui kama watu wameanza Watanzania wameanza kwenda Russia ama kama kuna...
Not that I know.
Okay, yeah.
But I also don't hear of Tanzanians, and maybe I'm not in the right news cycles. I don't hear of them complaining. You know, the way we've always had Kenyans in the Gulf having issues, blah, blah, blah. And even when we go through there, I don't think I run into that many Tanzanians in, say, like
That
Qatar,
many, yeah. I've seen few.
Dubai. They're there, but it's
Tanzanians,
they're not that
Tanzanians, most Tanzanians who are in the Gulf that I know of are mostly in Oman. There's a lot of Tanzanians in Muscat. And that's
because
mostly Zanzibaris.
Yeah, it's close to
No, and they also have a historical connection.
Historical connection.
They also have a historical connection.
Makes sense.
Like I'm not sure about like Qatar is very Kenya heavy.
Correct.
Dubai is very Kenya heavy. Dubai, I know there's also a lot of Ugandans. And then now you have Kenyans in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Jordan, and the conditions in those other countries are also not the very best. So yeah. On another note here, President Ruto likes using his X platform to comment on global conflicts, openly taking sides, something that has sparked strong reactions in a country where public opinion on these issues are deeply divided. How should national leadership navigate global conflicts when the public itself is split? Is strategic silence sometimes the wiser diplomatic path, or can silence also be interpreted as a moral compromise in moments of a global crisis? And I know you've also written about this, Irungu.
No, I mean, I think you've put it very well. Is it silent? Does silent neutrality the best option, or active engagement? I think, we have to remind the leadership that they must take an ethical position. They must have a moral compass when you have large numbers of people. Upwards of 1,000 people have died in the Iran-US conflict so far. The danger is, of course, is that if you take sides too abruptly on one side or the other, you can inadvertently unleash that violence onto your territory. And if you remember, for example, it was the Kenyan embassy that attended the opening of the American embassy in, I think it was in East Jerusalem back in 2018, that was quoted when the terrorist cells attacked Dusit. And when they were asked, why did you do this? They said, well, Kenya is obviously an ally, and they gave that as an example. Now, Kenya is within reach of the Iranian army. We have American bases. So one of the concerns that was there, which was somewhat allayed by the Iranian ambassador, who said that we are not going to target Kenyan soil. But I think it's really important that the Kenyan government does not insert itself into a war that has been started, I think, by one side against the other. I think the other thing that's critical is that there is an African Union position on the Iran-US war. And that essentially is that, that civilians must be protected, there must be de-escalation, there must be withdrawal of forces and the cessation of the bombings. And I think Kenya has to stick to that line. Once it begins to take a side, it will isolate itself not just within the Africa bloc, but it will also expose itself to the violence.
But this is quite confusing. The average person, let me say even the above average person, and this is where I think we need to do a bit better in Kenya when it comes to civic education, both outside school and inside school, because there's a lack of awareness. Like most people don't know about the African Union position, and even those who know about it, they don't seem to take it very seriously. So maybe we go back to some fundamentals. Who actually shapes Kenyan foreign policy? And I know now these are now a deeper question, because we hear these buzzwords, like thrown out every now and then. Would we say it's primarily the executive, the president, or we also have career diplomats in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Then there's security organs and intelligence services. Or does Parliament and the public have any meaningful impact on what the Kenyan foreign policy is? Because when a war like this breaks out, and the president tweets, like clearly taking sides, you wonder, like, is this part of the Kenyan foreign policy that I'm supposed to know that I don't know? What exactly is happening here?
Yeah.
Irungu.
So for the first time, I think 2 or 3 years ago, the Kenyan Foreign Ministry published a Kenyan foreign policy. There had not been one in the public domain for decades prior to that. It was always in a state of a draft. And when I looked at it, there were a number of important things there. There was reference, of course, to human rights. There was, I think, something like 20 references to national sovereignty and the protection of our democracy and our country. There was also reference to the diaspora and the importance of supporting and protecting the diaspora as well. So there was a clear policy framework within which the world, I guess, would be navigated. As you know, we've been opening embassies all over the world, and we have several embassies now, even in countries that it's not very clear to Kenyans why we are, investing that amount of energy. We have traditionally moved from, I guess, a focus on the West to a focus also on the East and to Asia, but also to the BRIC countries as well. So, that's what we know in the domain. Where we have seen real, departures from that is, for example, the ability of foreign agents to come onto Kenyan soil and try and abduct, presidential candidates from Uganda. Kizza Besigye was picked in
Kenya,
in Kenya, and driven across the border back to a military court. And we still do not have an explanation of how that could have happened, given that we have a very elaborate law enforcement set of services and an intelligence service that is probably one of the best in the region. We have seen cooperation between the Tanzanian government and the Kenyan government with regards to the abduction of Mwabili Mwagodi, who was abducted in July last year and taken across the border. In his recent arrest 2 weeks ago, as I was listening to the court case, what I realized was that actually the red notice that was flagged when he tried to go back into Tanzania had been placed on him 6 months before he had been abducted. That's the first time I think there's an admission or a clear, a connection between his red flagging and his abduction. So it shows that there was collaboration between the Tanzanians.
Was Maria Sarungi also who lives in Kenya?
That one is
Tanzanian
not so
activist,
clear.
yeah.
That one is not so clear. It's clear that the Tanzanian agents basically came across, and she was about 90 minutes away from being taken across the border, possibly to her death, when the public uproar was sufficient to actually block that from happening. Okay. So we've seen that. We've seen Turkish intelligence come in and pick
refugees.
4 refugees. We saw a Turkish request for counterterrorism, the counterterrorism unit to basically hold Murtaza Gungor in December of 2025. So these are the things that are not captured in the foreign policy, which leaves us always thinking, what is the policy behind the policy? Like, how is it possible that you can have cross-border abductions and that's not captured in the policy document? So is there another policy document that we need to be looking at? And therefore, that's the concern, that there are, informal systems that have been created in the corridors of, Harambee House that are just not accountable to the public. I mean, the more recent one, of course, is the controversy that Kenyan passports have been dished out, as I say, like lollipops to RSF Sudanese commanders that are, on sanctions lists by the European Union and the US, and they are traveling on Kenyan passports. How is that possible?
Now, the thing that I wonder whenever I see, like stuff like this, because I don't think the government has denied it, because this was broken by, I believe it was Boniface Mwangi, who broke this story. And I was expecting, like the government to come out and deny, but it was not denied.
They never do.
Yeah. So I'm a bit curious, because when we look at the issue of the RSF commander being issued with a Kenyan passport, we know that there's a conflict in Sudan, and we know that there are some American proxies that are helping fuel that war. United Arab Emirates has been mentioned. It is seen as an American proxy. And now my question is, and all these people from these countries, they have dealings with Kenya. Is there a possibility that Kenya could have been told, that this is our guy, give him a passport? Like Kenya could have been coerced to do that. Because you also understand in those back rooms, there are also people who are more powerful than others. Or is this just most likely Kenya? And I know we're now getting into the speculative, we're getting into speculative territory because we do not have information. Because there was the Sudanese guy, there was another guy from Zimbabwe, and there were many other people who were not talking about. So as
and
people,
this is the list that we have, because just imagine this is because this list was what, 20?
There were about 25.
About 25
July.
people. And this is between, was it 2024 to
2025 July, I think.
So what about the ones of before?
No, but like the ones of before, and remember, as people, I always tell people to be very careful. As people were worried about, like Kenyan Somalis being given easier access to get IDs than it was before. While people were worrying about that, there was this other bigger thing that was happening, because that was a very big issue and people were complaining about it. But people are not realizing that there are some real hardcore criminals that are being given passports by the government.
I bet you Tur had those passports.
So you see, we're in a place where we don't know. Washeke here on Facebook says, and politicians always weaponize poverty during elections for political mileage. They will be all over handing out unga, maize, beans, etc. The other thing that
and passports.
Passports.
Now passports have been added in.
Now passports have been added.
Some get unga, others get passports.
Yeah. The other thing that I was also a bit confused about back in the day, and this may have to do something with this new world order. Back in the day, when things like this happen, you would see Western nations posture like, oh, you guys are not supposed to do this. This is not the right thing. But that's not happening anymore. A lot of this cross-border repression to silence critics and activists, it's happening, and there's no condemnation, there's no sanctions, there's absolutely nothing. So could this be part of the new order that we are coming into? Because these things seem to be becoming normal.
Yeah, I mean, in moments like this where it gets a little bit blurred and we're not sure what's happening, I think it's always important to just fall back on what does the law say, right? And the Kenyan immigration law, as I think his name is Wahinya. So there's a Kenyan citizen who basically is not letting this issue go, and he has actually served the immigration office with about 6 to 8 questions on each of the people who got passports. What documentation did they supply? How much did they pay? Can we see the receipts that they went through? What was the process of determination? So it's a very methodical way of following the immigration law that should have been followed, we assume, in order for them to have lawfully received their citizenship. But I think the Kenyan law says that you don't just give out citizenship. There has to be a threshold of evidence that is provided. I mean, the documentation is quite sufficient, and therefore this idea that you're issuing passports to people who are under sanctions is just unheard of. So I think this scandal will continue to brew until we are able to get to the bottom of actually who facilitated this, who approved it, and who signed that these people get passports.
Passports.
And it will stop at the cabinet secretary, because the cabinet secretary is the person that approves.
Is ultimately responsible.
Yeah, citizenship is
yes.
not.
We were told it came from State House, right? Is that what they were saying?
Let me ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mika.
Remember the Armenian brothers, Artur Mangayan.
Yeah. And Sargarsian.
Yeah, even them, they had Kenyan passports, right? At some point, they were issued passports.
Yes.
They were actually police. They had a very high rank in the police.
They were auxiliary police or something. What do they call them? Like Mr. Shaw?
No, they were not reservists. They were actual. They had actual portfolios in the police service.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Mika.
So my question is this something that is as much as you're saying you want to investigate, we've seen it happen before. So is it a norm with the government when they want to do certain deals or being involved in certain things? Do they just issue passports when it serves their interests?
Hey.
I think like this is not. I don't think like Hemeti was the first like big time foreign criminal to be supplied with a Kenyan passport. I really don't think so. I think it's the first time it's coming into the public.
Or that we actually see a list, a whole list of people, more than 3.
And this was based on a leaked document. It was based on a leaked document. So these are things that happen. They're never talked about. And people never even sit to think about is there any foreigner. They're more concerned about, like Moha from Isli getting an ID when there's actually hardcore criminals, like people who are involved in international crime syndicates, war crimes, genocide, who are being given passports. Which is why I always tell people whenever you see, and this is a tactic that politicians are very effective at doing, they know how to throw wedge issues, things that will keep you guys fighting, that's very low impact when they do the big things on the side. So I think, like in part of educating ourselves within politics, whenever politicians throw something, you always have to have a sieve or a gauge and ask, is this a wedge issue? Or is this an actual issue that we should actually be following up on? When it's coming randomly from a politician at a funeral, there's a chance that this might be a wedge issue. And I think sometimes people don't have that ability to make that distinction. Number to call 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. We have the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya in studio, Irungu Houghton. We're here talking about a bunch of different things that are going on in the world. Now, Irungu, last year, the government had established a panel of experts to compensate victims of protests related to violence. In January, you resigned from that panel because you were part of that panel. Can you please walk us through what made you take that decision? And what does it say about the state's willingness to deliver justice for victims, Irungu?
Yeah. So the demand for compensation has probably been a amnesty demand going back at least to 2017. In 2017, we saw upwards of 70 plus people killed between those two general elections that took place. They were primarily people who were killed as a result of violent policing in the Kisumu County, places like Kondele and others. And we saw in 2023 the Sufuria Revolution. We saw, I think, about 50 people also killed during that period.
This is pre-Gen Z revolt.
I'm working
Yeah.
the history, so
Wow.
you get a sense of the focus. So this is 2023. 2024, 65 people were killed, and then in 2025, we had roughly about the same number in just 2 months, June and July. June and July 2025 was probably the most deadliest of months of violent policing of protests. So you've got about 300 people who have lost their lives in the process of street demonstrations. Now, there are probably thousands of people who are maimed, who have become amputees, who have been unable to go back to their normal lives because of injuries that they sustained, either from tear gas canisters or from brutal assault or from gunshot wounds. So this demand for compensation has been there ever since. When I was asked to join the panel, I insisted that there be 3 levels of intervention by the panel of experts. The first was that there be a commitment to non-recurrence, that this would not continue, and that essentially what would happen is that you pay off people almost like blood money. People are killed, you then pay them off, then you kill more people, then you pay them off, and so on. So the non-recurrence was very important. The second one was accountability, that there had to be accountability for police officers and their commanders who have essentially carried out these operations. And the third area was reparations. This is the idea that, if the state has killed people like it does in the US, you don't have to take them through a 6 to 8 year court case, that you can actually just acknowledge that your police officers kill people in the line of duty and compensate them. So these were the 3 demands that were embedded into the terms of reference for the panel of experts. The panel of experts was sworn in, and then within 2 days, there was a petitioner that went to court and secured a suspension of the panel of experts. So actually, no work was done. No allowances were given. I had already declared that I would refuse any allowances for doing that work, and that I would continue as Amnesty's director. The court processes dragged through until about December, and then came back with a ruling that essentially said that the panel of experts was duplicating the role of the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, and that a constitutional commission was a better body to be able to carry out the process of determining, for example, who is eligible for compensation, how much should they receive, and then thirdly, how do we stop the continuation of the violence that we were seeing. That, I think, was a very fair ruling. It was a very just ruling, and I acknowledged it publicly.
Okay.
What then happened is what led to my resignation, which was essentially behind my back. The panel of experts went to court and appealed the decision, despite the fact that I had publicly in a column declared that it would be unwise for the state to appeal, and secondly, to prolong the legal process, because there are, as I've said, hundreds, if not thousands, of families that are basically grappling with what does it mean
struggling,
to have lost
waiting.
somebody.
Yeah.
Rex Masai's parents, for example, but there are many. Erickson, the young man who was shot, Shege, the other man that was shot just outside Parliament.
Baby Pendo.
Which is a case that Amnesty continues to follow to this day. What they did was essentially appeal the decision. So I instructed lawyers. First of all, I resigned, and then I instructed lawyers to disengage myself from that appeal process. About a week ago, the ruling on the appeal came out, and the panel of experts has been told again that they must essentially fold and pass that responsibility to the Kenya National Commission on Human
Now, this
Rights.
is in the Court of Appeal.
This was basically, it was still at the level of a high court.
Okay.
But it basically, that judgment came through. and the Kenya National Commission is now the only legally mandated body to do this work.
But isn't there a possibility that they may go to a higher court to appeal again? Is that a possibility?
It's the law of diminishing returns. If the objective of the president was essentially to, I guess what you say, to make good with the victims, dragging this through a court process is not only time wasting, but it's also expensive, and it actually does not lead anybody to the outcome that everybody, I think, hopefully wants, which is the idea of compensating and making sure that there is no recurrence of the violence.
Now, if it was known, like from the get-go that this is the body that's supposed to handle this, there's a government agency that is required to handle this, why was a panel of experts being formed? Was this a political showcase, or what exactly was it? Because from what you say, it seems you agreed with the first ruling that this was supposed to be done by the Kenya National Human Rights Commission. So at the point when you were being appointed, what was your thought process on, did it ever occur to you that this is an illegal body that has been created to do a function that a government agency is supposed to do?
Yeah. So there were a lot of legal opinions at that time, and I took a lot of legal counsel. I also took a lot of, advice from the victims' families themselves. So we held 4, what you'd call 4 hearings with victims' families. And what I was told by them was not only did they want me to go into the panel, but second, to protect the interests of the victims and their families. But they also wanted, at some point they said, we would actually prefer for NGOs to manage this money, right? Not the state. Now, I was there essentially to protect their interests, to make sure that there were 3 things that did not happen. One was that there wouldn't be corruption, because we've had a very bad history of reparations and compensation. If you think about what happened to the IDPs, that were displaced in 2008, 50%, 70% of what was actually paid out to the IDPs didn't go to IDPs. It actually went to people who were connected with the provincial administration at that time. So the first thing was to protect the community from corruption. The second one was to make sure that the sums of money were, dignifying. Now there's no price you can put on a life. But, insurance companies do this all the time. Actuarial scientists do this all the time. They work out, what is it that you can give as a symbolic gesture to people who have lost their lives or have lost their limbs. So the second thing that was very clear in my mind, that was to make sure that we didn't end up with little 10,000, 5,000, 50,000 contributions to families. And the way that I put it was that at that time, if the president was willing to give 2.5 million shillings to footballers participating in the CHAM, then the payouts for communities that have lost or families that have lost their loved ones would have to be significantly much more than this. So that was the second thing, was to make sure that the contributions would be befitting of the trauma that these families had gone through. But once the courts suspended the panel of experts, I actually suspended my activities, and the panel suspended. So we actually did no work at all. But as soon as the court ruled that the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is the better mechanism for this, it was time for me to resign.
So has the Kenya National Human Rights Commission taken over the job right now, or is it still in that gray area?
So I was involved in a consultative process after I stepped down with the Kenya National Commission, and my advice to them was to seize their mandate and not worry about whether the money would be found, but essentially do the work so that this administration had the opportunity to make good if they wished to do that. And if they didn't, the next administration could pick it up. Because there's something about essentially taking action in the moment, which is much easier than coming back 10 years from now and trying to reconstruct what happened in 2017 and 2024 and 2025. Yeah. So I think that's where they are at the moment. But I just saw the supplementary budgets And my article this weekend, actually the article that comes out tomorrow, is actually on the supplementary budget. And what I noticed was the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights did not receive an increment on their budgets. They've actually seen a budget cut by 9 million shillings. And therefore, the only thing I can conclude from that process is that there is no interest within the executive to fulfill this promise to the victims' families.
So that's a subtle message.
Well, let me make it a bit more unsubtle. There are institutions that have received large increase in their budgets: the National Police Service, the Intelligence Services, the Ministry of Interior, all the agencies that have been implicated in the killing of Kenyans. They have received budget increase.
Wow, that is
still subtle.
Yes, no. This is what you're not gonna get from the 9 o'clock news. Yeah. This is information that you're not gonna get on the 9 o'clock news, and I think these are the small details that they understand that most Kenyans are not gonna understand. Like they're not going to look at the supplementary budget. They're not going to understand that this agency was given more money. Some money was cut from this agency. So it is really, really sad. And I think that's part of what Senator Sifuna was talking about, because I think it was part of the 10-point agenda that he kept talking about when ODM and UDA, had some kind of deal. But anyway, the number to call is 202.
It's funny you brought that up.
Yes.
What's the date today?
Today is the 6th of March.
Which is?
The 6th of March.
Isn't that the day when they were supposed to be doing the 10? They were supposed to
the deadline. There was supposed to be a deadline. Was the deadline
March
the 6th of March? I think the deadline was the end of March.
Then it was tomorrow, the 7th.
Oh, it's the 7th of March. Yeah, it was the 7th of March. Yes. Deadline is tomorrow.
I knew I was not so far behind.
Yeah.
Thank you,
deadline
Mika.
was tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you, Mika.
Deadline was tomorrow. But that's something that we'll wait and see what's going to happen. There's a lot of drama, happening within the parties. Mika.
I wanted to say something, Ali. So you mentioned Sifuna, and I remember one thing about the Linda Mwananchi group, or what they're pushing for, is they're saying okay, how about we forget about campaigning about development and power and everything for right now, and let's go back to the basic human rights that Kenyans need. How about we go back to allowing people to demonstrate without loss of life, like allowing people to do things without government interference and impunity on oppressing people, So I want to, and this is something I want to ask Irungu. In your last life, are you thinking about ways on how, if we're doing civic education or educating people, or how we are trying to talk to people on how they vote for their leaders, is it high time that Kenyans should actually let's forget about roads, bridges, houses, Singapore and Guinea, and look about how are we protecting ourselves when it comes to times when we feel like we are not being represented well and we want to communicate that?
So one of the things that I explored in the column that comes out tomorrow is how we are allowing an administration to continue digging the country into deeper levels of debt and public deficits. So the supplementary budget and the budget statement for the following year all envisage the meeting of the deficit by essentially domestic borrowing. Now, what we know about domestic borrowing is that it crowds out loans for business, and particularly small and medium enterprise businesses, right? So the hustlers that essentially voted for the administration will find it increasingly more difficult to find loans to expand their businesses. The question we need to keep asking ourselves is, why is it that after two consecutive pushbacks against two finance bills, that this process continues to happen? Now, if you put this next to the levels of impunity, the corruption and impunity that we've seen, so you've got for example, not just the national government, essentially investing in projects that are never finished. I mean, Murar Kabasu's work that he did in 2024 still remains vivid for me, where he did a very simple thing, which is to just go around the country and look at projects that had been allocated money and what actually was on the ground. The county governments, the use of public taxpayers' monies to essentially pay MCAs vast amounts of money in allowances, the use of lawyers, which essentially has become a money laundering scheme. I think these are the things that we keep asking ourselves, is whether we are actually doing what Einstein would say is the definition of insanity, right? You continue to allow the government to borrow. Parliament is not providing oversight. And secondly, in fact, Parliament is actually competing with the executive through CDF and other schemes to run their parallel programs, rather than oversighting the executive, both at the level of the county and the national. And then somehow we expect that come 2027, we're going to elect a different breed of politician, a different breed of leader. I think, it's just too far-fetched for me. And I think what we have to come back to is that this period, the 17 months, I guess, before the elections, must see a very vigorous voter education program that is not just focused on the right to vote, not just the acquisition of voters' cards and IDs, but it's also about making sure that the environment does not deteriorate sufficiently to the point that, like Tanzania and like Uganda, you will have an exercise. You will have people come out and vote in some cases in Tanzania.
And 98% winner.
You'll get a 98% winner. But the reality is actually nobody believes, not even the incumbent believes that they won the election.
Yes.
And therefore there's no legitimacy, there's no mandate to rule. And then we're back into a cycle of mistrust and undermining of the state's capacity to deliver on the things that it should be delivering on. And I think that's what, every right-minded Kenyan at this moment should be thinking about, is actually how do we resource, particularly this young generation, this 6 to 12 million people that will be eligible to vote in the next election, but still are not clear about what the power of their vote is, for the country.
But that's very heavy, when you talk about it, when I think of the average person, because I always think about the average person, and yes, they know that there's problems. They know, by now, most Kenyans know that Kenya is under a lot of debt. Some of it is odious. Jimmy Wanjigi did a very good job in breaking it down for people to understand, the situation we're in. But tasking the average person with this, what does he need to do? Because it's one thing to acknowledge that this is the problem. It's a mountain of a problem. But what does the average person need to be doing now? Because that time is running out. 17 months is not that far off. So what should that average person who's just going about his business, maybe, he has a boda and that's how he makes his money. How does that look?
So I think people can engage at different levels depending on where they are, right? So that individual boda rider has very little power if they try and intervene on their own. But there are a lot of young people now who are running border businesses, right? If they can come together and begin to ask some difficult questions, like, for example, why is it that roads still have potholes? Why is there flooding in Nairobi? And essentially begin to put pressure on the county government, because I think one of the things that we fail to do is to put significant pressure on government departments that are responsible for doing certain things. There's an article you quoted, which is this article I did on the basis of the Commission on the Administration of Justice, the ruling they did on the case of Kaliji and Coldwater, I think it was, Coldstone. And what it was essentially one constructor had basically built almost onto the lip of the other building, so that actually people could literally jump from one balcony to the other.
Wow.
The reduction of sunlight was dramatic. They had destroyed the wall of their neighbors. This is a very common story across most of Nairobi and in
Correct,
some of the counties as well.
Happening in Mombasa too.
It's happening in many of the counties. But what was really significant about this was that the administration, the Commission on the Administration of Justice, or the Ombudsperson, had actually gone and done their analysis, and they found 6 of the county officials, starting with the county minister, culpable for essentially passing the approvals even before the building constructor had actually done what they needed to do to get them approved. So they were pre-approved to do this. Now that deadline is coming in a few days' time. The question is, and I asked the Commission on the Administration of Justice, did you receive a phone call from the county governor of Nairobi thanking you for the investigative work that you had done? Did you receive a phone call from the majority leader of the county assembly saying thank you for protecting Nairobi residents? And I was told, no, I received no phone call. In fact, if anything, the 6 individuals have sued the Commission on the Administration of Justice. So one of the things that I will do when we get back is essentially to rally residents' associations in solidarity with that case to make sure that there is no cartel bullying of an independent office or a constitutional commission. That's what we need to see much more happening in the Kenyan context. And I think whether you are, a market person, whether you're a border person, you are feeling the cost, you're feeling the pinch of essentially corruption.
Yeah. Okay. And it's getting worse, over time. I normally joke with my nephews and nieces, and they call me very old. Because I tell them there was a time, I remember the first time I was sent to the shop to buy bread and milk. I had 5 shillings only. And I was able to come back with milk and bread for 5 shillings. And this was in the 90s. We're not talking about a long time ago. This was in the 90s. I don't know how much bread and milk costs today, but I'm sure, with 5 bob, even 10 bob, even 20 bob, maybe even 50 bob, you might not be able to get bread and milk. So it's kind of like, I tell people to think in the context of the United States. If we had experienced the same inflation that Kenya experienced, a gallon of milk would be costing around $22. Yeah. And that's what I think people sometimes don't contextualize, because a gallon of milk today might be $4. When I looked historically, it was about $1. Back in the 90s. So it's one of those things that people don't contextualize. And when people are told that the quality of life was much better at that time, even for someone with a low income, they do not have quite an understanding.
It was easier. Ali, I remember, it's funny you say that. I'm the guy who used to be sent to the store to go buy milk and bread.
Yes.
I'd be given 20 bob, and I would come back with 7 milk, 2 bread, and I come back with change.
Wow, 7 milk, 2 loaves of bread,
yes.
and that's
Irungu, my line.
Yeah.
I'm not as old as you, so I don't know what you're talking about.
And you see, what I also realized when I looked at the packet of milk that they have now, and unless it's me who doesn't understand sizing, it's a smaller packet. Like there's less, that sachet carries less milk than the Tetra Pak.
Even
we have
bread.
a word for it in Nairobi. We call it the kidogo
economy. Yeah.
So that one is
even bread real. Even bread, the size of bread imepungua. Unakumbuka Elliot's.
Ali, super loaf was called super loaf because it was super.
It was
big. Like this.
Yeah.
It's not that it was just a name. It was a big. I remember that family bread.
Kuna ile mkate ilikuwa na jina mbaya.
Gani hiyo?
Gani?
Ile ilikuwa kama matusi ile.
Gani hiyo?
The one we can't say on air.
Oh.
Yeah, ile
kama Mika hawezi kusema.
Imagine.
Kweli ni mwezi mtukufu.
And then wacha nikuulize Bandio, Tanzania mulikuwa na nusu mkate ama kuna kitu kama nusu mkate kwenda kununua dukani?
Yeah.
Okay. Because hiyo concept ya nusu mkate and then also if
Quarter.
you live
Tulikuwa tunanunua quarter.
hiyo quarter
We used to
hiyo
buy quarter.
Quarter ilikuwa high school.
hiyo quarter ilikuwa ni high school.
But
Yeah.
no, watch a canteen. We used to okay, I went to school in Pumu. Next door KJ we were buying quarter.
So kulikuwa
Kwa
na
kiosk.
mimi kenye nakumbuka kulikuwa na ilikuwa block kulikuwa na mkate like half loaf but ni full loaf. Sijiko
half loaf but ni full loaf.
Ni ile nika ilikuwa mbaya. I don't know if that was the bad one.
Like,
Yeah.
I think you know motion anasema alikuwa na kati wako kijene uzo quarter like ilikuwa
they used to cutter for us. It was cutted in half, then it's cutted in quarter. Now unauziwa quarter. Now, but I think that those again were those economies of scale because of majengo.
Ilikuwa high school ilikuwa ile mkate furi na
No,
katoma
no, but ghetto Mika unajua ghetto rules ni tofauti.
The rules were different there.
Rules ni tofauti.
Sasa tunakwambia ghetto ndo alikuwa nako ka half loaf ka full loaf.
Haikuwa half loaf.
No, ghetto.
No, I'm telling you ilikuwa
yeah.
quarter. Ilikuwa quarter. Unanunua quarter straight up ni quarter.
Yeah.
Na hata hiyo quarter pia kuna vile unaweza mwambia ebu kata tena then mnapiga split decision.
Alafu bandio Tanzania mulikuwa mna system ya kununua sigara, and I don't encourage people to smoke, but ukiwa mdogo back in those days watoto walikuwa kitumwa sigara.
Singles, yeah.
You could buy a single,
Yeah.
you know, like sigara moja hivi hapa.
Yep.
Yeah, so Tanzania pia mulikuwa
zile
nayo
zina filter.
hiyo sigara moja na
unawashia huko dukani na unakuja umeishika.
Yes.
Mi siku nilikuwa navuta sportsman ulikuwa unatoa 10 bob unapata 3.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But sigara hiyo ni sawa, acha iko expensive. Hiyo ni kitu ambayo ina madhara yake.
Ali, you did
Yeah.
know these things, but when ndio ulikuwa unatumwa?
But when ni mtoto, what choice do you have?
Yeah, my friend. That's where smoking started, especially for
For most kids, yeah, I know. For most kids.
Me, I never.
Unakuta the parents smokes, but hajawahi
tried
kununua matchbox. Kwa hiyo anakutuma afu nakwambia waiwashi huko. Alafu
Yes.
unakuja umeshika in a way that haitoliwa na upepo.
Yeah.
Mbelo anaongea ni kama ana experience.
No, but he knew. And you know,
Yeah,
funny
anaongea
enough,
ni kama ana experience.
Mimi hakuna mtu kwenye familia yetu
our
aliwahi kuvuta.
grandmothers smoked, and then they smoked the ones bila filter.
Yes. Roster.
Kina nyota.
Kulikuwa na roster na ingine inaitwa crown band.
Yeah.
Na inawekwa mdomoni una
Yes.
reverse.
Yeah, they reverse it, yes.
Ili isiliwe na upepo.
And I'm like, how are these people smoking this thing? And it was
okay.
inside the tongue, and then they would move it, and
Yeah.
then it comes out one side, mdomo iko hivi.
Yeah. Yeah, time imechange hapa. Washeke anasema not to forget change from the 5 shillings Ali. Yeah, hiyo maziwa na mkate. Yes, na kulikuwa na change.
Correct.
And then Washeke
Na
hapa
ukumbuke kwa Tanzania ndiko likutoka jina la daladala. Dala ni 5 shillings.
Yeah.
So wakati ule 5 nauli ya matatu ilipokuwa shilingi 5.
Yeah.
That's when magari madogo yakawa mengi. So dala ni 5. Dala ni shilingi 5.
Yeah.
So when you hear them say daladala,
So the matatu.
Na sasa Kenya, unajua matatu ilitoka wapi? Matatu ilitoka jina kwa sababu ilipoanza haikuwa shilingi 3, ilikuwa ni penny 3.
Yeah.
Penny 3. Mnakumbuka hata penny 3 because kulikuwa na shilingi, kulikuwa na sumni, kulikuwa na penny. No, sumni ilikuwa 50 cents. Penny ilikuwa ni 10 cents. Yeah. Alafu kulikuwa na ndururu which is 5 cents.
Correct.
Before ndururu si tu kupata, kulikuwa na hela. Yeah. Hiyo ilikuwa ni 1 cent. Yeah. So yeah.
Na Zanzibar kuna chai maharage.
Okay. Hiyo hapo, hiyo sijasikia. Hapa Washeke anasema there was trash pickup, buses running on schedule. Correct. Running water, and we had street cleanup in estates.
We were given dustbins by country.
The silver ones.
Yes, the silver ones.
And nobody stole them.
Yes. Nobody stole them. Yeah.
Yes.
Camero, yeah.
Yes.
I remember those, you know, like, and this is funny thing, this is not that long ago. And then Esther anasema bread is no longer 500 grams, it's paper thin.
Is she talking about the slice, or she's talking about what they call it 500
No, unajua hata hiyo nini, hata hii bread, you know, like there was corruption, you know, like from the shopkeepers.
Hata slice.
Ni kama pizza 7-Eleven.
No, by the way, wacha nikwambia hiyo half loaf ilikuwa
pizza 7-Eleven, my goodness.
Kuna duka zingine walikuwa hiyo half loaf wanaiba slice moja kwa hii.
By the way, that's the corruption I'm talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
They would get a slice from this, a slice from that, and then they would create a whole loaf.
Yes.
And then sasa utaiuza as mkate full, but hii hapo umeiba kutoka kwa huyu na umeiba kutoka kwa huyu. A lot of corruption, you know, going on at that lower level. And then hapa Stephen JJ anasema sahi kuna quota. Washeke anasema shrinkflation in Kenya is real. Esther anasema we have too many micro sachets of everything called kadogo. I remember even Blue Band, there was a time they created a sachet. Na mimi nilikuwa nashindwa like what is
one time use.
Yeah.
Sabuni ya kufua.
Kadogo was normalized in the market as something ya watoto wakibebwa wakienda break. Ilikuwa kobole, and then advertisement yake ilikuwa like kadogo, like shule mkienda, like advertisement yake ilikuwa like watoto wa shule wanaipaka break time kwa mkate. So ati inakuwa badala ya kubeba mkate imepakwa home, imeenda iko sogi, inakuwa fresh, like anapaka hapo fresh anakulia hapo. That is how kadogo is normalized, but as it was supposed to come in because economy ilikuwa inaharibika at that time. Ilikuja after 92.
Yeah, after 92.
Ilikuja
after YK 92.
After YK 92, ilikuja after 92. So economy ilikuwa ishaanza kuharibika. They were just not showing people that we are going into a microeconomy, but it was normalized. Iyo na ilikuja in such a way that ilikuwa inadanganywa ni ya watoto wa shule kubeba like it was something for take away.
Yeah, because I remember, you know, like dollar moved from being, it was 30 bob. You know, like from when I first started seeing exchange rates, it was 30 bob. Then it moved so suddenly. Ikaenda mpaka sijui 60 something within a very short period of time. And that's when things started going haywire. And then Esther nasema we have too many micro sachets of everything called kadogo. Stephen JJ anasema kobole. Yeah, so that's where we were. And I think, you know, like
sisi tulikuwa nazo mpaka kwenye lika. Okay, umeshasikia tunasema anakunywa viroba.
Viroba nishasikia. Viroba ni nini?
Ni zile juala ndogo.
Hizo zilikuja Kenya.
Hizo sachets.
VAT 69 zilikuwa nazo.
Easy Safaricom.
It's a small sachet.
Kina black and white, kina Napoleon. Mpaka zikabaniwa. They had to be banned. Ikakuwa like gunia zilibaniwa Kenya, everything had to be 250 going up.
Yes, but I think also because kids started buying them.
Yes.
Na unajua kulikuwa hakuna. Yeah, no, there's no way anyone will ever ask you for any ID.
Walianza kuuza pombe ya 10 bob.
Okay, yeah. Kweli tumetoka mbali. But anyway, let's take a different twist here on something entirely different, Irungu. Who defines Kenyan identity? There's, I don't know how to put it, there's a secular versus the religious culture. So Kenya constitutionally is a secular state, but it deeply remains a religious society where faith often shapes culture, education, and even politics. When tensions arise, whether over issues like school traditions, religious dress, or cultural practices, who ultimately defines Kenyan identity? The constitution, the courts, or social norms?
I mean, I think the answer to this one has to be the Constitution, because it is the only instrument that we've got that protects all religions, all faiths equally, and ensures that there can be no discrimination on the basis of one's faith. I think the second one is keeping the state secular does not mean the state is hostile to any religion. It simply means the state remains neutral, right? Courts remain neutral. And that allows for all religions and those people who choose not to be religious to be protected under the same law. I think that's the framework that we fought for in leading up to 2010. And that's the framework that I think safeguards all religions.
So I think there's a conflation of different issues that we see sometimes on things that regularly emerge. I famously tell people the first time we saw a lady with a hijab on TV, it was Jamila Mohammed. And I remember it was such a big deal.
It was a revolution. It
was 1999. It was such a big deal. And I think nowadays people see a lot of hijabis on Kenyan TV, but they don't understand that people were actually not allowed It's not like there were no, like Muslims on TV before then, but people were not allowed. Ironically, I talked to my mom about this because I remember a time when I was very young, when I used to see her to go to work without wearing a hijab. So we talk about this now as grown-ups. What I didn't realize is that, especially back in those days, you're a Muslim woman, you're in a professional setting, you're not allowed to wear one. And sometimes it wasn't like a written rule, it was just standard.
Yeah, you knew.
You're not allowed to do it. Here's the weird story that my mother gave me. He's like, the first place that she worked where she was allowed to wear a hijab, because at some point I started seeing her with a hijab, was the American Embassy. Of all places.
Yeah.
And she told me, her boss, who was, of course, an American, not a Muslim, is the one who one day asked her, when she was very new, how come she sees, Muslim women wearing this, but
she doesn't wear.
So she naturally thought, especially this American embassy, they're not going to allow
no
me.
way.
She was like, no, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the first, and that was so ironic. So now we had this incident at Loak Girls. Now, this is not even secular versus religion. It is one religion, Catholicism versus another religion, where there's this girl who the parent was assured that she'll be allowed to wear her hijab. But as soon as the parent turned around, when she went back, she was told that you have to take that off. And this hijab issue has been quite a recurring theme for a very long time. If you go and Google, you'll see very old articles from a very long time. In fact, I famously, talk about my aunt's story. She doesn't like me talking about it. This dates back to 1960, early 60s. This is kina my mom's firstborn, where she went to, she got admission to a Catholic school in Murang'a County. I'm not going to mention the school, but she got admission to the school, and on the first day of school, at least they were transparent. You're Muslim, kwaheri. You're not gonna attend this school. Kenya High School was the most notorious school. It was the most notorious school for not allowing Muslim girls to wear hijab. I don't know whether they've started allowing, but Kenya High, because it's a famous school. So maybe talk about that and let us know, is it a lack of proper regulation, or what exactly is it? Because you're also seeing people taking very radically different positions on this.
Yeah.
Irungu.
I think that's why we have to go back to the Constitution, right? We have to say that actually, there is no state religion. Article 32 and the preamble basically protect all religions, the right to faith.
Yeah.
And therefore, no institution, private or social, can actually outlaw the expression of religion simply because they come from a different religion. We see the same case in terms of Catholic schools, not allowing Muslims to be able to practice. One of the proudest moments. So Amnesty International has probably 2,000 members who are active in secondary schools. And one of my proudest moments was during a cultural festival when a young boy walked up to me and said, "Mr. Director, I just want to tell you about my struggle." So I said, "What's that about?" And it was in Western Kenya. So I think it's Kisumu Boys, I think high school. And he said to me that he joined the school. He was a Muslim. He requested for prayer times to be observed so that he could just leave the class and come back. It was denied. He requested a prayer room, a place where he could worship. It was denied. And then he mobilized non-Muslim students to back him, and they petitioned the head teacher. And under the pressure of this entire number of students, he got his right to be able to pray when he wanted to, and in a place that was dignified for his religion. And that's the struggle that's happening now. I was a bit shocked that this was still happening because this was about 2 years ago, several years after the constitution had been passed. But obviously, as we know, that constitutional freedoms or freedoms and rights are not given; they're actually claimed, right? So you can have a constitution, but if it sits in a book somewhere and nobody's actually internalized it, then it will not be experienced by people. So I think the first thing is to just indicate that, as of 2010, as of the new constitution, it is actually unlawful. It is illegal, and I would probably argue it is unethical to prevent somebody's right to worship simply because you do not have the same, or there's a majority community that is different from that faith. And I think it also goes, we've also heard more recently about, Rastafarianism. Right?
Yes.
So, my DJ friend here, who has probably the most interesting, longest hairstyle in this room, would not be able to get into Strathmore University.
In fact, it's funny. You see,
Oh wow, they did not allow dreadlocks.
They did not allow dreadlocks.
No, wow. In fact, even when I first started working here in the US, this is not a style of hair that you are wearing when you're going for interview. In fact, if you had this style of hair, unakata,
to go for an interview,
you are not going to be hired. You won't be hired. There is no way. I remember way back, I think in 2000, when we were interviewing a guy, and the guy came in and he had cornrows.
Yeah.
So tunajiangalia, he was really good, very qualified. But issue ilikuwa hapa kwa
professionally
cornrows.
qualified.
Yeah.
Extremely good.
Hairstyle.
And we hired him. That guy was the best hire ever. Lakini, those cornrows of his, he wore them. He really wore his cornrows. But it was like, then now you see a lot of people with, it's become the norm.
The
But
Crown Act.
You could not. You could not.
The Crown Act ndio ilifanya tukaanza kuweka dread. Watu wa corporate sisi.
So there was a law that was passed.
Yes, by Obama.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah, but and then it's also the law that allowed black women to also wear certain hairstyles at work.
Wow.
There was discrimination on black people's hair. So yeah, this is something like hata mimi kama tuo mosh, there is no way I could have my hair the way I have it right now until that it came in after 2019. 2018, I think after 2018, 2018, because the Crown Act ilikuja na Obama.
Yeah.
So before the Crown Act, there was a way where black grooming was considered. It has to be in a certain standard.
Correct. Yeah.
But listen, this is the absurdity of this, right? If girls have their hair straightened, let's say African girls have their hair straightened,
Yes.
they will be allowed into class, right? Yet the straightening is probably the worst thing that you can do to
your
natural hair.
Yes.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
But if their hair is plaited, that for a long time was considered to be not acceptable, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that we have to confront essentially is a hangover from the colonial period that essentially was a European white supremacist approach to how African people should or should not look. And it continues to manifest even today. There are certain standards, there are certain beauty standards that are somehow retained that have nothing to do with our original culture.
Yeah,
that have nothing
it
to
is
do with our
because-
original way of being.
Mika.
Look at it this way. A white person can grow their hair out to a ponytail and have a mount bun. It's totally fine. They're considered to be groomed. But a black person cannot grow their hair to their original length, to the length as they're supposed to be. It was considered unkempt. You were supposed to shave your hair to a certain length to be considered well-groomed.
Even beards.
Wow.
Yeah, even beards
was an issue.
Even beards. Now you see people with the long beards,
Yeah.
which are what I would call the religious, Islamic type beards. You see that a
Yeah.
lot with West Africans. The
Yes.
beards are mpaka huko, and
Yeah.
it's accepted. but
Yeah, it was a
you
big issue
couldn't.
before. I know that we have someone on the phone lines, but before that, Sheke here is saying, leave alone dreads, natural hair in black women has always been deemed unprofessional in the corporate world.
Yep.
And Esther says, the colonialists tried to sanitize the colony into Christianity by restricting our institutions to align with Christianity. They stripped the Africans of their religious and cultural traditions, like shaving their shaving their hair, forcing them to abandon their dressing styles, and even architecture from round huts to square huts. They also had to change their dance to stiff, less aggressive moves. I did not know about that. I did not know about that. Yeah, so we have someone on the phone line there, Bandio. Aya, tell us your name and where you're calling from. Karibu to the OneMic Show.
All right, 4881.
Good evening, wadau.
Holy
Good
moly.
evening, wadau. Mambo vipi? Mpo?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Was he screaming, shouting, or
Salam,
other?
I think he was making up for all the hours that he missed.
Mosh, I am sure the snow imeisha, ski ni shida, ni sawa tu. Haina ngori.
Okay.
You could say hello. You could say hello to our guests. You could say hello to our guest, because clearly you're missing in action
That's why
again.
I said hello. Karibu sana, Mr. Irungu Houghton.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, Mr. DJ.
Thank you.
Sawa kabisa. Ole, I joined in late.
Bora unaingilia Uno amekuja na excitement, yuko happy, amefurahi, unaanza
Where
kumwingilia.
has he been? Us guys were over here working hard na yuko happy.
No, wait,
Ukienda disclose location Uno kusumbua.
Wewe cheza chini ya maji bana. Kwa nini unaniingililia na ni hii ni story
Wachana na
yake?
Uno pia cheza remote.
Aya, Uno, talk to us.
Go ahead, Uno.
I'm just listening. I find it interesting that, like, me when I was in high school, there was freedom of religion. I didn't encounter anything that was, there was you could not do whatever you could not practice. It is when I came here that, like talking to Ali, and then you find out how, and you start hearing stories of how, if you're not Christian, nashida. If you don't profess the Christian faith, then you would be, you like now, like Ali was talking about, like mom, not mom, but going to a certain school, being admitted, but then you've been told, live and direct, you can't do that. Constitutionally, it's a secular state, but to be quite honest, religion imetusumbua. Tuliletewa Biblia, tumefilisika. Ali.
Yeah, I also tell people story at Strathmore. Irungu mentioned Strathmore University.
Yeah.
I had an experience with Strathmore School. I had an experience with Strathmore School. They used to, of course, there was the KCP, and then they used to have interviews where you would go do the interview, so they would look at your score for the interview and KCP.
Yeah.
So KCP, flying colors. Interview, I did very well. But guess what?
Yeah,
admission time,
Muslim.
block. They never said that. But
Your name betrayed you.
but because my mom knew someone on the inside.
Yes.
Yeah. Alimwambia too, because my mom wanted to follow up on why. So yeah, so she was just pulled up on the side.
Aliambiwa achana na hii story.
Yeah. So I tell these people who went to Strathmore at the time, I don't know whether it's changed right now, but I tell people who went to Strathmore at that time and they could actually not believe it. And I was like, yes, like it was, and for us, our names, they
betray.
They betray,
yeah.
But interesting thing, right next door, St. Mary's was very friendly to Muslims.
That's how you ended up at St. Mary's?
It was one of the friendliest. No, St. Mary's May went for IB. After high school.
Okay.
That was after high school.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. But St. Mary's, and that's where sometimes I get confused, because St. Mary's was a very, very it was over friendly to Muslims. Yeah. So they had a chapel in school.
The public schools were also over friendly to Muslims.
So
I remember girls in hijabs and then wearing the school dress with the pants underneath.
So now you see a school like it. I think it depended on where the school was. Unaona kama Luak is apparently now a national school. Luak Girls is a national school.
But they should be
I don't
nationally.
I don't understand the concept of maybe the school is still owned by the church, but at the same time it's a government school, and I think there's a lot of schools.
Or sometimes It's just the person who's running the school.
Yeah, the
Yes.
principal.
Problem.
Yeah,
I think that's what it is.
the principal
Yeah.
brings their
The
personal.
principal of this school,
Yeah.
because then I'm going to go back and point out something. The problem is that you see this religion discrimination. This religion discrimination, unfortunately, it happened in mostly private schools, and you will find that it will happen across all religions. There were schools whereby they just wanted Hindu students because it's a Hindu school and they were dealing with Hindu staff. Right? The same way, if you'll go to Parkland, you'll find there's a Muslim school in Wahindi, but in Wahindi wa Islamu pekee. And they will do that's the same way these religious schools, Kina Nazarene, Kina Strathmore, Kina Nani, came out with this stuff of Kina Baraton. They were like, you are supposed to
7th day.
to be religiously tied to that church, because I think the way they positioned themselves, it was more like trying to marry into the religion. So this is more of an administration problem than saying is an issue. I don't think there's anywhere where the Ministry of Education tells a certain school that you're supposed to discriminate against certain people. It sits down more to who's administering at that particular moment. A school like Loak is a public school. When I was in high school, ilikuwa provincial high school yenye ilikuwa inabeba kila mtu and everybody mwenye anaweza lipa fee yuko nini.
Yes.
So there is no reason why Luwak is supposed. Mimi nilikuwa Kakamega High School. Tulikuwa na Muslims, tulikuwa na Wahindi. Tulikuwa na kila religion. Like basically on Sunday kila group ilikuwa inaenda kivi yake kwa kona yake. Mimi nakumbuka mimi nilikuwa mkato, lakini nilikuwa najifanya mimi ni SDA wakuaga na service. Niende ni relax. Nikakenda SDA on Sunday. Nisikie kwenda service. So basically kulikuwa na kila mtu, like everybody was catered for. Na tulikuwa Kakamega Ushago. So Luwak ilikuwa tu kando yetu, iko kuwa mbali, hawezi kuwa na ringa hapa tuwachukue Islamu wakwende huko. Na kwanza unajua the amount of Muslims wenye kwa Western Kenya ni wangapi?
Ni wengi sana.
I was surprised
Wengi sana,
to see that story
especially
from Luwak.
Mumias.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see that story coming.
But those things happen na vile Mika amesema, vile Mika amesema, it is more dependent on who's
the
there.
administrator.
Because there was clearly someone who told the parents that it's okay, and then after the parents left, someone came and said no.
The goalpost was moved.
Yes, this cannot this cannot happen.
But I think
Uno.
But I also think Ali, I think the issue becomes when you're Christian, when you've been raised Christian, you really have never gone through, let's say, what our Muslim brothers go through, or Hindu brothers, or or brothers and sisters. We really don't get what happens. That's why sometimes you'll be like, oh, at least these people cannot do this. Like, what do you mean? Even me, I was able to do that, but yeah, because you're not Muslim. I think there's a disconnect. And I think it's not a disconnect of not knowing, or it's just you've never been exposed. You've never understood, you've never been exposed. But I think it's about exposure. Like, having sat with Ali for this so many years, it has opened my eyes, like, in terms of discrimination. Like, now, for example, think about it. Unasikia mtu kama Ali kupata ID, amezaliwa Kenya.
Yes.
Lakini Ali ni gaidi, why should he get an ID?
But then, you know the one thing we're also supposed to do is this.
Yeah.
Hold up, nilikuwa nimejimute. The one thing we're supposed to do is this also, right? We also have to realize that lack of exposure is not sometimes due to lack of trying. It's lack of circumstances for somebody to be put in that situation, right? In terms of, like, if me, I've been born in Kiambu, right? The way I see things happening in Kiambu is how I know how things are supposed to work. So if I
100%.
don't
I agree
understand
with you,
how
brother.
Mika who's been born in Busia, that Mika kupata ID lazima rudi ushago ndo apate ID because amezaliwa kwa border
urudi na
district
grandparents
na
na ID
ndio
zao.
niende kufanya nini.
Mhm.
It doesn't make the person in
Narudi
Kiambu who
navuka,
doesn't understand Mika's struggles wrong.
But I think
You
It
get that it
Yeah.
doesn't make them wrong. It's and this is why when we come to things like civic education, when it comes to things of highlighting struggles of what's happening throughout the country, it's supposed to be highlighted to improve in that, so that other people can understand that in certain areas of the countries, the realities in that area are not the same as the realities of where you are, because we usually judge life based on our realities. I do not still
Or
lazima ni
exposure.
understand
Yeah.
struggle yako.
Yeah, but Mika,
But if I'm
Mika,
exposed
one
to
thing
your
I'll add.
struggle, then I can know that.
Yeah, Mika, one
Let
thing.
me ask a question.
Because unajua issue ni nini? The thing is this. Ali unaweza kuwa na struggle yako yenye ni struggle kwako, and then you also have things to you that are normal. Na mimi kwangu what you're counting as normal kwangu ni struggle na si understand. So pia unaweza uni understand mimi.
So, Irungu, you said you had a question.
But I think
Yeah. Ngoja kidogo no. Irungu has a question.
So I get the point about ignorance and lack of knowledge and narrow-mindedness, and I use these words not as abuse. I use them just as just as they are, right?
Yeah.
So I get that, but I think what's really important is that there are people who are hurt by others' ignorance, right? So if a child is being forced, if a Muslim child is being forced to go for confession, right? Catholic confession, that is just a worldview clashing against something that child has been brought up. And I think the level of abuse is unacceptable. I looked at this, I just looked up, because I remember somewhere in 2022, there was a circular that went out from the Ministry of Education. And it's worth reading this, I think, just for just capturing a bit of it. So one of the things that it says is that, and this went out by the PS Ministry of Education back in 2022. It said that there are some schools that are violating the religious rights of learners and using religion to either deny admission or to expel learners. And it talked about, forcing students to either take Islamic religious education or Christian religious education against, or even Hindu religious education against their own personal religions. The failure to allocate worship rooms, the failure to give people an opportunity to observe religious rites and prayers. All of this is a violation of the Basic Education Act of 2013. So I think what we have now is a legal framework that does not allow this to happen. And what I think schools need to understand is that they can be fined. They can be essentially fined large sums of money for violating the rights of their students by the parents. And I think this is probably where we need to kind of rest this conversation, because I think if you allow for cultural, preferences, ignorance, and other things, what you're doing is you're opening the door for essentially abuse of the Bill of Rights.
No, so I'll tell you. I'll tell you. Mika, I'll come back to you, but I'll tell you, Irungu. From the Muslim experience, because because these things have been happening within our families for a very long time, and some of them, like being denied admission. By the way, those are things that we saw as normal. Right. And I even said earlier, I'm okay with being denied admission because they only want people who practice, this religion, and I'm not part of that religion. So that's something that we saw as normal. By the way, another school notoriously on that list, Consolata. Those of you who went to Consolata Primary, maybe you might not know this, but that was another school notoriously also on this list. But I think the issue that sometimes people see with Muslims, it's sometimes not necessarily maybe out of ignorance. It's more of there's certain people, because I usually go to forums where I'm anonymous just to hear what people have to say so that I can have a perception of what the average person is thinking. So a lot of, and when I say the average person, I just mean most people. A lot of people, privately feel Muslims are asking for special treatment. And it's because of the nature of our faith. It's generally very daily, very every few hours, and it's generally very visible. Like our prayer is not private. It's not private. You could sit in a corner and it's something. You'll see us standing, you'll see us kneeling, you'll see us bowing. There are specific times. Like we have dietary requirements. We have of course, the dress code. So it's very visible thing. So some people take this to be these people are constantly requesting for special treatment. So that's a perception that some people have, and that's why they feel like hawa nao wanatutafash sana. Like why are they asking for this and why are they asking for that? Why did they go to a school that's a Catholic school? Couldn't they have gone to like a Muslim school? So that's the vibe that I get anytime these things come up, because they keep coming back despite all these laws you talk about, despite everything, despite all the knowledge that people have had on this issue, despite the fact that media has highlighted them like so many times, it still comes out like as special treatment, and that's just what some people feel. Mika, you had something that you wanted to add.
No, me, I was saying that, what I was saying was like when I was talking about the ignorance bit, I wasn't talking about using it as an excuse. I was responding to OneMic when OneMic was saying that when OneMic was talking about how maybe the average Joe person doesn't understand like the struggles that this other person is saying, and that's what I was saying. Like most of it can come from that. I wasn't trying to say that we use ignorance as a way of oppressing people or as an excuse of oppressing people. Now, another thing that I wanted to quickly touch on was that when it comes to denial of right of worship or denial of right of or forcing of observation of other religions, that when it gets to that particular moment, that is not ignorance. That is basically somebody has told you, I do not subscribe to this, but you're forcing them to do something else, right? Or you're denying them to do something that they are telling you that this is what I'm subscribing to. Then that becomes a total different ball game. That becomes oppression in that you are stopping that person from observing something that they rightfully are supposed to do or are entitled to do. So at that point, even if, okay, fine, I have no idea how a Muslim is supposed to pray, but I'm not supposed to tell them, go to church.
Yeah.
Because I know they don't go to church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some interesting comments here, like have been coming. I see, let me see. Esther here says, have you seen the Momboko style? I think this was related to the dance. Have you seen the Momboko style dance to the time of an accordion? It's a caricature of the square dance of country dance. The colonialists love that. And then Washeke here said, those Catholic schools are notorious for discrimination. Some of them still discriminate students from single moms and deny them admission. Esther says, Loreto Convent Valley Road discriminated against non-Catholic students. It also didn't admit students from single mothers. The students were strictly under Catholic integration. Funny thing, most of them were the first ones to get pregnant the moment they became independent as university students, because they got out of the Catholic cocoon into the real brutal world. That is Esther's point of view, and it's Esther not a reflection of yeah, that is Esther's point of view. Sure. But I think this is something that I think the Ministry of Education needs to pay attention more to, because it keeps coming up, like every so often, and I've never really understood why. I've always said these things, and nowadays look at them from a perspective of I want to understand. When you, for example, tell a Muslim student to go force them to attend a church service, like what is the goal? Like are you maybe looking to convince them and convert them? So I sometimes just try to understand, or maybe is it that you're trying to have a uniform experience for all the students there.
Correct.
So the students who are already, Catholic, they remain, or the students who are already Lutheran or whatever religion they belong to remain there. That's something that I've always tried to understand. But I think over time, even within our community, things that we used to think were normal, like being denied admission, no one would even complain. Someone would just come back
You
home
just
and
move
say,
on.
wamenikata hapa, unaambua nenda hii skuli, unaambua hata
you move
usiende
on.
hii skuli na hii skuli, hawata kukubali.
Yeah, because
but go to
those
this
schools
one.
they don't take, or even
Yeah.
just like the one with the single mothers. Like those stories pass. They already
Yes.
tell each other, say, hii shule usienda because huko you'll be denied. You're a
Yes.
single mom. In fact, you forget about
I
it.
think
Hata-
also Kianda, maybe if Hanigal is here, can tell us. I think Kianda also had that single mother.
But Kianda, I think it was a Catholic school.
Yeah,
I think it was a
Kianda,
Catholic-
yeah, Kianda was a Catholic
so
school.
those things happened so much. But when I think back to, I went to a public primary school, and we had Muslims, we had Hindus, we had Sikhs, we had all of those really, and everybody was. In fact, they were even given their own rooms
Yes.
where they went and
Now,
practiced
it's
and prayed.
interesting. There's certain institutions like, and that's why might get surprised, like Nairobi School and Nana School.
Yeah.
They were, as in these things were allowed. People were allowed to practice whatever they for a very long time.
Yeah.
So that's why we would find it unusual when people from other schools
Are
tell us
complaining,
that
they
you
don't-
cannot do
they
this
don't
or you
have
cannot
that.
do
Yeah,
that.
because I remember even guys from Changes or Patch would come to church. I
Yes.
grew up SDA. The school bus would bring them, drop them. They come in their uniform, they pray with us. Nini, kuna wale wanaingia wakicheck out ndio waende home, alafu wanarudi before the bus comes back.
Yeah.
But guys would come. Guys did all of. So it's interesting to see all of that. And I saw, I went to school in Eastland, so Muslim girls hapo too.
Yes.
Area,
And Muslim girls was also a very mixed school. Yeah.
Extremely. I
Yeah.
knew very non-Muslims who went to Muslim.
Yes, it was a very mixed school.
Area, non-Wahindis.
Yeah, Paklanzaria.
Yes, but everybody know, okay, huko kuna Wahindi, huko kuna nini, then of course the Aga Khans,
Yeah.
where people assume ni Wahindi peke yake, the Hospital Hills, mtu anasema hapa kuna wase wale wako Warui, the ones who couldn't make it to St. Mary's, waliepo wakapelekwa huko, the
Yeah.
disciplinary people. So there was all these things that were going on. But hey, ukisikia this one of today where your hairstyle unafukuzwa shule, ama sijui ati it doesn't make sense.
Anyway.
Because of
I
religion.
mean, the bigger question for us is like, what is the purpose of education if it is not to create an appreciation for people who are different than you?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
if we can't create that in our children,
Excuse me, that is called DEI.
Wow.
if we cannot create that in our children,
Awesome.
then how do we create citizens that are able to live and respect and, even interact with people who are different from them? Whether
Yeah.
they look different, whether they think differently, whether they pray differently, all of these things have to be taught in schools.
Which is one reason why I really admire Tanzania, because on this, they are 10,000 years ahead of us. And I think also culturally, it's a fairly unified country where sometimes you cannot even tell the difference between who's a Christian and who's a Muslim. I mean, of course, until very recently, with this recent election,
Tension between
the tension between the two religions,
Island and
which maybe
mainland.
had been there, but like day-to-day living, they integrate very well, while each of them is still practicing their own faith to their best. Anyway, because time is running out, I wanted us to talk about the rapidly expanding digital infrastructure. This is just on another turn. We have police databases in Kenya, electoral systems, and surveillance tools. These technologies, are they primarily being built to improve public services, or are we quietly expanding the state surveillance capacity? And do citizens truly understand how much personal data the government now collects and controls? Because we've seen people, especially during the Gen Z revolt, being picked up randomly. How they found your location, it's only the government that knows.
Data trail.
Yeah. Irungu.
No, I think it's a major concern in many ways. I mean, so there's two sides to this. One is the increasing availability of government services that can be accessed digitally. And if I go back to 2023, I think it was the promise by President Ruto that he would digitize up to 5,000 government services. That promise was actually met, right? So many of those services are now available anywhere in the country, which is great because it means you don't have to come to Nairobi, you don't have to come to a county headquarters. So that side of the digitization, service digitization, has been really critical. The other one, of course, is access to the internet. We still have one of the best, fastest internets, not just in the region, but sometimes when I come to the US, I find that actually the internet speeds are actually are slower than what I can get in Nairobi.
Interesting.
So this is all good news. The other third point, I think, is that the Data Protection Act, which was passed in 2019, is actually a very superior piece of legislation. It's built on the European standard rather than the US standard. And therefore, the rights of citizens are very well protected. The concept of informed prior consent before anybody accesses your data gives you a legal framework within which you can protect yourself. And people have started to protect themselves. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but in the newspapers, when the results come out in the KCSEs or the KCPEs, as we used to call them, they used to publish the faces of the best achieving students.
Yes.
There was one set of parents who took their school to court and said, "I didn't give you permission to put my child's face there,"
paper.
and the amount of money that they were awarded was sufficient to probably pay for 3 years worth of education for that child. So even schools are having to think a little bit more carefully about how they use people's data. These are all the positive things. The negative side of this has been the emergence of mass surveillance, particularly in the wake of the 2024 Gen Z protests. Not only have we had people's data being accessed, but we've seen the collaboration between, for example, the security services and Safaricom show up in court cases. There was the case of David Mukaya, who was really a landmark case. He is a young university student. He was accused of designing and posting a photograph of the president in a casket. And the case dragged on for several months. About 2 weeks ago, he was acquitted of all charges. And actually the judgment from the court was quite damning of not just the National Police Service, but also Safaricom. And one of the things that the judge said is that it doesn't matter how important the personality that's being targeted with satire. It doesn't matter how hard they are, pillarized or defamed challenged. It's important that the intelligence services and the police services work within the rule of law. So actually what we had there was another slap down on the Cyber Crimes and Misuse of Computer Act, which is one of the worst, laws that we've generated over the years, simply because it is used to essentially criminalize free speech and satire, which is in other parts of the world completely accessible. So I think Amnesty published a report last year where we actually documented the experiences of several protest leaders. And unfortunately, it looks like that process continues to follow up. We've had 3 abductions or 3 cases of arbitrary arrests recently, including this young man called Menelik last week, who was picked up by DCI. He was held, he was taken to court. And then the ODPP said, unfortunately, I can't see what law this young man has broken. So he was released, but then rearrested and then finally released only because he got legal representation.
Wow.
So this is a major concern, particularly as we move into the electoral period.
Okay. Now, if the government knows that they have no case when they're arresting these people and they've lost major cases, based on that, why do they keep doing it? Is this to intimidate? Because that process of being arrested, being, taken to custody, being brought to court, it's very humiliating. So are they doing this with a hope that they might win some of these cases? Or is this just a tactic? Because we've also seen people like Boniface Mwangi, taken to court with terrorism charges. and that was splashed in the newspapers.
Yeah.
What do you think is the goal? Like when they know clearly that they cannot win these cases in court.
Yeah, I think it's purely intimidation. I mean, the idea is to frighten people, and the sad side of this is that the use of counterterrorism laws, counterterrorism assets, security services to terrorize populations by simply picking off one or two people and taking them through the process is just almost a travesty of a very important law that we have to actually keep Kenyans safe from hardened terrorists. But I think the case of Boniface Mwangi is also interesting in the sense that last year in June, July, the state declared that there were 75 people that they were going to charge with terrorism charges. If I can tell you today, none of those cases have proceeded. They've actually been withdrawn. Every single one of them. There is no single person, no single protester that is still under terrorism charges as we speak now, because the case couldn't hold in a court.
Okay.
Have they all been found in terms of those who were abducted, blah, 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 all of that? Is there anybody who's still missing out of those, or that everybody's back home?
So there are mysterious deaths. So I think, of some of the cases that we were investigating in 2024, 2025, which really just, there wasn't enough evidence to declare what had happened to these people. But people who were found in gorges, people who were found, they had allegedly hung themselves in bathrooms. There's a lot of those cases. There are also cases of unidentified bodies that were never really matched to a family at the city mortuary. In many cases like that we were very concerned about last year. And then the third group is people who, just didn't come back. I think there are 2 or 3 cases like that, particularly in 2025 January, that we assumed, unfortunately, that they may have been killed and their bodies disposed of. So there are cases like that that are there. But I think the important thing to recognize is that actually where, human rights organizations and the Law Society of Kenya moved quickly, there was many people that actually did come home, including people like more recently Mwabili Magodi, who was arrested on the border. But there are cases like that.
Okay. Now, as we come to...
caller.
We have a caller.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, this caller has now come the last minute.
They've come at 10:58.
Yes.
Give them the last 2 minutes.
Yeah.
All right.
They always do that.
All right. The last 49349. Hello.
Yeah, please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Welcome to the OneMic Show.
This is Esther Mulusa. Hello, this is Esther Mulusa. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can
Esther,
hear
we can
you.
hear you.
Talk to us loud and clear. Esther, last minute. Give us your 2 minutes. Let's go ahead.
Yes, I just want to go a bit back to the colonials. I'm calling from Kakamega. The colonials did a very big number on us. I want to just take us back onto these issues that are still dogging us up to the present day.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the hair thing. The hair thing is still, the hair politics is big in Kenya. Like there is an assistant chief in this village who runs after little boys who have rastas, It's like a crime to wear that hair. It's associated with Bangi. But
Yes.
he will not run after criminals, but he made sure he runs after these boys, So those are colonial throwbacks, The politics of hair is big in America, So it's something about just criminalizing anything African. And then I remember a long time ago in Kenya High, I had cousins who went to Kenya High School, and they had very white mannerisms. I don't know if any of you remember Piggy, the way she used to flip her hair, And these African girls with their curly hair, they would imagine that they have golden locks and they would flip, they had the head flip. The way white people throw their hair back, So that is something that has really deeply ingrained our girls.
Correct.
And some of them do the same thing with their weave. They imagine that they have white, put their fingers through and push it back. Or somebody like Kasmuel, the Kasmuel boy, the way he cuts his hair. The men used to do that in the 50s, 60s, partly in the 70s. That's not how African hair grows. African hair doesn't, it goes from the middle of our head. It's the white people's hair that has to have that parting, that line. So these are things that we do, but we don't realize how thoroughly messed up,
Where? Okay.
And I remember my grandma's wedding. I told about my grandma's wedding. She was a Christian. She was properly Christianized by the Muslims. And our wedding had to be different from the African wedding. She didn't have a car, so her limousine was an umbrella. So she was brought by an umbrella from her home with, the bridesmaids and everybody. And they had to match. They couldn't dance. The Luya, vigorous dancing.
Yes.
Leg, you didn't do that.
Security.
You had to compose yourself and walk in certain style and dance to Christian music, dress like a Christian. Like I said, the square houses that are not very stable, that's a white colonial concept. Our round huts are very stable. The wind could not blow them away, but we just follow what the white man tells us. So I think that's all I wanted to say. But I like what is happening right now. Young kids are going back to music in their own language.
Yes.
Kids are singing in their own language. I also like the weddings. Traditional weddings are making a big comeback. The Rorashos, the Kwaitos, the Vukui, that's the Luya, the Kalenjin Kaito, the Kikuyu Rorashos. People are going back to their traditions. They're not just doing the white wedding like they used to. So I like what's happening right now. People are going back to traditional foods. So we are slowly just reclaiming, very slowly, but we still have those mannerisms, that are very white centers, and that's really damaging a person when you can change somebody's language. People don't want to speak their traditional languages; they only speak English, French, So that's just my little contribution. That we've really been messed up thoroughly well, and we need to reclaim who we really were. So that's my only contribution, and thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Esther,
for tuning in from Kakamega.
Yeah, and in addition to what Esther has said, I think it's also very important to also go beyond the weddings and the funerals and the music, because I think those are the three parts that I see people trying to reintegrate culture. There's other day-to-day things, like how try to find out how decisions were made in your community, how conflicts were resolved. So many things that we are having issues with some of these systems that were given to us.
And the language.
Yeah.
The language is sometimes
the language is a big
this
one.
Younger generation.
The language is a big one, and I think parents maybe need to step up a bit on that, especially from the ones who are very young kids, still salvageable. I think that's actually very, very important. There was one other point that I wanted to make, but nimeisahau. Hiyo hapo itakuja. But I think in terms of generally culture, I wanted to give the example of Rwanda. Remember, like during the genocide, had they tried to do that trial using the Western court systems, there's some legal experts who are estimating that it would have taken maybe 50-something years or maybe even 70 years, but they were able to do it within their Gashasha system, and they were able to, like those who apologized were let go, and wale walikata ndo walirudi wakafungwa. But I think there's something magical about our cultures that I think people are now starting to see. I think it's important to go beyond that. Now, before we let you go, Irungu, you had recently wrote an article, and you wrote where the cities we fail to govern eventually become unlivable. And we know that Nairobi currently is experiencing a massive real estate boom. Yet at the same time, we're now seeing devastating flooding and infrastructure failures across the city, like we've been seeing just this weekend. What does this disconnect tell us about urban planning, governance, and accountability in Kenya today, Irungu?
No, I mean it is one of the saddest things, I think, for a country that wants to industrialize, that wants to urbanize, and has a population that wants to live in cities, that we just are not producing the cities that our people deserve. The lack of planning, there is no master plan for Nairobi. My ward, I think at some point, a few of us as residents actually in the Kilimani ward, we actually put money together to sue the county government to create a ward development plan. And that for me was one of the most bizarre things. And I kept asking, are you sure they have refused to do this? It seemed to be such a standard way of starting. But, many of the buildings that are going up are just not meeting any of the threshold of, safety. They're substandard materials that are being used. They are essentially building, beacon to beacon so that there is no space for any greenery at all. So you're starting
parks,
to see,
walking, all that.
All of that, So I think one of the things that, I think residents will have to do is to fight for a city that is livable. I mean, it can't just be a city of concrete monstrosities that go up, I think until we start to see organized collective action by residents and businesses, we're not going to produce a city that anybody wants to live in. In fact, if anything, people are moving slowly further and further away from the center of the city. And that's in some ways irreversible. Like once you have built a city that is crowded, it's polluted, it has no sunshine, what you will start to see is that 20 to 50 years from now, that city will decay and people will move out. And then you will just have empty buildings that nobody really wants to live in.
Yeah, and that has also been happening, like in parts of Mombasa, like if you go to parts like Chuda, it's been happening and it's very unfortunate. Then this has been happening in Eastlands, ukienda sehemu kama Kangundo Road. This has been happening for a very long time. So I think it's important for this to be looked at across the board. Wahenga walisemaje? Sijui kama Uno Mike bado yuko.
Yupo.
Are you sure yupo ama anapayuka?
No, it's no longer there.
All right. Uno.
Hayuko.
Wahenga walinena kilicho na mwanzo hakina budi kuwa na mwisho. Meli imetia anga. We are about to wrap this puppy up. Mika. Gaze.
Guy.
Kama Mika yuko.
Simwache niongee sasa, mnaniambia niongee alafu mnyanyinya.
Sorry, bladha.
Sorry basi. Forgive us.
Kama mnataka kuongea semeni niwaachie muongee.
Yeah, Mika, you just talk.
Anyway, what a thank you, Irungu. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for providing us with the company. And just hope that the people in Nairobi wako sawa sahi. Hiyo maji ilikuwa inakaa mbaya.
Ni mob.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Ni mob.
And
Na ni mbaya.
also hopeful that the war is a third world war. Everything de-escalates and we go back to normal. As in, let's go back to normal politics. Vitu za kawaida.
Midterm
Missiles, drones, this is too scary. Now, like you cannot tell us to eat healthy, to reduce weight, and then you start dropping bombs. Why are we staying healthy if you want to kill us with the bombs? No. Apara.
We're cooler.
Yeah, we should avoid this life. Anyway, all in all, just want to wish everybody a nice weekend. Kumsisahau ino weekend yenye mna spring forward, so your Saturday nights are gonna be short.
So time ya kufungua pia ina spring forward 1 hour. So yeah. So it will move from around 6:10 to 7:10. Yeah.
Hata ni saa pia hii weather ilikuwa mbaya. Anyway, all in all, be careful out there. Enjoy yourself and take care. Bye-bye.
Asante sana Mikasi. Thank you, Bwana Irungu. You as usual, you bring light to the studio for us with the expertise, and you break down stuff for us in a very nice way. And I'll let you jump on when you come to your piece to kind of tell us, what direction you're headed in. Hiyo kitabu nafanya, ile kitabu konayo, you didn't get to necessarily mention, but we also want to know.
Akiwa mvuvi wa watu.
Yes, he could be, but lakini alisema that hana your plot Kitengela and he's not going to farming. So let's see, but he could be a farmer of people. Anaweza kuwa na vile namuona iko strategic hata hiyo time anatoka
Too dumb.
It's very it's very very strategic hiyo time Sazila anatoka, so akona enough time kupiga campaign na kudonjo. So but ajasema bado, but we are saying it here on the show. Thank you very much. We'll see our fans next week. Thanks for supporting us as usual, and let's pray. This is it's supposed to be an extremely holy month, because this is double Lent plus Ramadan. Doesn't come too often. And then tumeongeza war, surely. See you guys. Take care. We'll talk next week.
All right. Asante sana, Omosh Fire. Irungu, give us your parting shot.
No, once again, just to thank you for keeping this platform running and active within the diaspora community. I think, as we often say, our people perish without knowledge, without debate, without an opportunity to formulate their own minds. So this is always my first point of call if I'm heading to Washington, D.C. And I look forward, hopefully not next year, but hopefully sooner, to continue discussing. As Amnesty International, we continue to engage. My successor is already being sought, and the process of identifying that person has begun. So by the time I leave at the end of June, there will be a new director, and I hope that that director has an opportunity to also come and bonga some stories with you here on this this great show. Have a good weekend. Stay safe. Continue to speak out against the escalation of the war, and continue to support those causes that you find important back in the country. Thank you and good night.
All right. Thank you so much, Irungu. And one of the things that I've always been, not so happy about is how human rights defenders in Kenya have been caricatured to some point and vilified by both politicians. You have these paid hitmen called bloggers, and to a certain extent also the media has played those narratives, because I think they get views and they get likes, and the media likes that. And unfortunately, you're a product of, what you consume. The media holds a very important role. And unfortunately, I think in this environment of algorithms, they've had to adjust and do certain things in a certain way, which is why we are in an era where we have so much information, but we are in the misinformation era. Like, there's so much information out there, but people are very heavily misinformed. And I think, in our education curriculums, we need to start, and anyone who has a child, we need to start teaching them how to process information. Like if you receive a screenshot, if you receive, like a short video, what should your first instinct be? How can you verify that information? And what about even if you're getting something from mainstream media, or what's apparently a trusted source, but then there's maybe some propaganda laced in it? How do we identify that? How do we do that? Because it's not a very easy task, but it's something that needs to be done, because politicians understand this gap, and they've become very good at dishing out things that they know will boil your blood, will make you want to do certain things, while they go and do the crazier things that they that are more consequential, that are hidden from everyone. I want to thank all the listeners who are tuned in, all those who are commenting. Asanteni sana. Now, next week we will have an episode, but the week after next week itakuwa ni Eid. So I'm gonna tell you mapema that we're not gonna have an episode that week. I think that will be the Friday of the 20th. That's gonna be Eid weekend, and then we'll come back the week after. So next week we are still gonna have an episode. Na kwa hayo machache, yote ambaye anataka kunipigia simu, nambari yangu bado ni ile ile, ni 1-800 mteule. Operator akishika simu, mwambie unataka kusema na mjukuu, na akikuuliza ni mjukuu yupi, kumbushe ni mjukuu yule wa Masai, because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, Masai by choice. sichagui, sikagui na sibagui. Kwaherini.
Una Mike.
Aiden, Daddy loves you. Jerry, Daddy loves you. Nemo, Daddy loves you. Until next week, be blessed. And thank you, Irungu Houghton. Asante sana, Buddha Boss.
Thank you very much.
All right. Asante sana kama nilivyosema Ali, wiki ijayo tuko hapa, so asante kwa kuwa nasi. Asante Irungu kwa kuwa nasi tena, and hopefully utakuja hata baada ya kustaafu. All right.
Kujiuzulu ama kustaafu?
Kustaafu.
Sasa
ni kuretire sasa. Kwanza umri unaruhusu.
Okay.
Na term zimeisha. Kwa hiyo hajajiuzulu. Angekuwa ni one term au katikati ya term tungesema amejiuzulu, lakini huyu amestaafu.
Unajua katika siasa ya Kenya ukiwa na miaka 60 wewe ni kijana mdogo sana.
Lakini sio siasa.
Sasa unaingia kwa siasa.
Sasa unaingia.
Ndo sasa akiingia kwa siasa wataambia yeye tayari anakaa kijana mdogo. Akiingia pale tambue kijana mdogo sana.
Na Oburu Odinga.
We
hadi wakati mwingine. DJ Majajari Moreta habari.
Man, Mike, you're getting us tired.
Buddha Boss.
You are the last party in the conference.
ABH sound, baby.
Drama 1